All right, this thing is rolling. Just positioning everything so that my phone won't fall off during the sesh here. Okay, I think we're good. All right, hi everyone, this is Steph, and many of you have asked me, and here it comes. This is a Q&A question and answer video regarding the Gaucho Derby 2024 that I participated in this February. And many of you have asked me questions, when we met, or on blogs, or on the internet, or in the comments. So I thought I'd put this video together. And a lot of you have sent me questions as well, which was awesome, or commented and asked different things. So I tried to compile it all together. It's going to be sort of a systematic rundown and the training, what you need, how it's all organized. It's not going to be a full-on day-to-day description of the race, because I think that would take forever. That will exist in German on my German blog. So far only in German. Sorry, guys. We'll see what the future holds, but for now this is a Q&A. So for each of you who are just curious or maybe interested in doing either the Gaucho or even the Mongol Derby yourselves in the future, I think this could be a cool resource. And if you watch the whole video and you still feel like there's some questions or something you didn't understand or something more you want to know, feel free to just put it down in the comments. I'll also post some links in the description box below with some, links to the products, the places to train, some of the brands, so you can go nuts with that. All right. Here we go. First things first. What was the application process? Okay, so you have to check the website of the Equestrianist, both for the Mongol or the Gaucho Derby. So they're both run by the Equestrianist, and they have specific deadlines for each year and each event. And then they have a sort of description field that you have to fill out with your equestrian experience, with your fitness background, with what you've done. They do want to make sure that you have some decent riding experience, that you're generally fit and active. Not to discriminate, but you do need to be fit for this event, not just to do well in place, just so that you don't actually end up hurting yourself, because it is very physical and pretty tough and pretty challenging, which is what it's supposed to be. So they're trying to make sure that they get people who are physically capable of doing this race and doing it as safely as possible. And so I went to the website and filled out this whole application form with, pictures and videos and descriptions of what I'd done so far and what I rode and where I rode and for how long. And it was kind of at that point sort of a spur of the moment thing where I had heard about it before. I'd looked into it. Had been thinking about it for a while, but it wasn't really real in my head. I was like, oh yeah, this event exists and it sounds kind of crazy, but kind of cool, but it's just never gonna happen, is it? It was one of those. And originally, I had heard of it through my friend Heidi, who is an endurance rider from Canada, the Lower Mainland in British Columbia, because she had won the Mongol Derby in unison with two others. They were holding hands, crossing the finish line in 2016. So I visited her one day and I saw this huge golden statue on her shelf, a horse statue, and I said, "What is that?" And she said, "Oh, that's from the Mongol Derby." And she told me about it. And I thought, well, that sounds nuts. I could never do anything like that. A few years later, here we are. So yeah, that's how I heard about it all. So I applied online, I filled in all the blanks, sent away my application, more or less kind of forgot about it after, thinking that, oh yeah, you'll send it, but there's all of these amazing horse people that apply, so they're probably not going to give me a call. Well, they did give me a call. Eric Cooper gave me a call and explained a bit more about the race, the challenges, how physical it is, how remote it is, the inherent dangers and what can happen and what has happened in the past. People come off, people can, get pretty bruised up if they fall onto rocks. Some people have broken, ribs or ankles or that kind of stuff. That does happen. That is a possibility. And they also do make it really clear that they have as many safety mechanisms as they can in place. They have a communications team, they have a medical team, you have an inReach, you have your Garmin, you have your emergency messaging system on the inReach that you can connect to your phone, so you can almost send a text message, which might take a little longer due to satellite coverage, but there are things in place, but nevertheless, it is an extreme outdoor event that takes place in one of the most remote areas of the world, which is the whole point of the event. So they do communicate this very clearly up front. Also to make sure if anyone has any, second thoughts or uncertainties about their physical capability, that they have enough time to maybe rethink if that's what they feel is the right thing to do. And yeah, so that phone call was really, really fun. It was lovely talking to Eric for the first time. I was like, okay, well, that was kind of cool, and it sounded really good, and he seemed really positive. This is what happens when you have makeshift stuff in place and no fancy studio, but only I'm literally balancing my phone on top of some books with a what is this even? With a bubble gum box. Okay, here we go. Maybe this is better. Hope you didn't see anything weird. Okay, let's try again. So the phone call with Eric went really well. I thought, oh, this is cool. He sounded kind of positive and enthusiastic. He's like, yeah, you have a great, equestrian background, and what you do sounds really cool. And because I've worked with horses, I've wrangled, and done endurance, and I'm fairly fit because I exercise and train for other things too. Still didn't think that they would, select me because it's only 40 spots and hundreds of people every year, just opening the window, apply. So I thought like, yeah, I mean, of course there's a chance, but probably not. And then I think it was 2 weeks later or so, I got the email that said, congratulations, you're on the rider team for the Gaucho Derby. And my initial reaction was, yay! Oh my God, what have I done? So it was an instant one like this. And that was actually in 22. Summer 22, and then the Derby was supposed to be in February 23, so that was only a few months after, not even a year after. And I thought, well, that's really cool that I got on the rider team, but that's not a lot of time, and I can only train so much, apart from my job. And yeah, I mean, be there to be there, but it's not going to be anything super ambitious. And then we got an email later that year, towards I think November, that the event was going to be pushed back by a whole year because of disagreements regarding land use, and a lot of riders still, because of COVID, struggling to, come up with the funds because it is expensive, and that they just want to have a good experience for the riders and a great event, and not just sort of shoestring something together that then would be disappointing. So they pushed it back a year, so to 2024. And initially I was kind of bummed. They did give us the option to get a full refund. We didn't have to be stuck with it. They would have either given us a full refund, or we could have used some of the funding towards the academy. So that's a sort of training session in Patagonia. I think it's a week. I haven't done it, but it sounds really cool too. And it's sort of both a preparation for the actual race, and also for people who maybe aren't so sure if that's what they want to do, if it's really up their alley, if it's really within their scope, so they can come for a week and test out, the gear, the horses, the terrain, how the navigation works if they've never done that before. So it's a sort of an easing into the setting, and yeah, it's a cool thing for sure. And initially I was kind of bummed that it had gotten delayed, because I was getting pretty excited and riled up about it. But then I thought, well, now I don't have an excuse anymore to not be serious about it and not train. So yeah, I did train in the sense that I already worked as a wrangler and barn manager on Vancouver Island. And so I had a busy job every day, very physical, outdoors every day, riding horses, working with horses. So that helps, of course. But it's of course not the same as riding, 50K a day at a faster pace. So that is different. I do ride endurance races whenever I find the time and someone has a spare saddle, because I currently am not in a position logistically to have my own endurance horses. So I ride with other people, and whenever there's an extra horse that should be entered in a class or something, then I get a chance to ride them, which is fantastic. And I do train a lot of other things. So I jog. I wouldn't call it running, but I jog just for cardiovascular fitness. I love swimming. I know a lot of people hate swimming pools, but I do really enjoy just doing laps and getting into the zone and just going back and forth and being in the flow. I really love that. It's a great way for me to tune out my thoughts in my head. I've always been to different levels into fitness, so calisthenics or weight training or just yoga or what have you. So I've always been active. I did definitely ramp up my training for the event. I actually participated in 2 boot camps with Stevie Dillahunt in Bend, Oregon, who is also on the management team for the Gaucho Derby, who has done both the Mongol and the Gaucho Derby, I think, during their pioneering ride. So the first time they've actually done it and scouted the route. So she knows the event really well. She knows what riders are up against and have to deal with. And she's also a very accomplished endurance trainer and rider, has many, many horses successfully on the endurance circuit in the States. And has different boot camps for different topics. And one of them are the derbies. And I think they're really great. I think they're a great opportunity to work at pace, also with some of the equipment that will actually be used in the derby. So you can test out a Mongol Derby racing saddle, or you can test out a Gaucho Derby Gaucho saddle. And that's a really cool thing to do. And then play around with that, play around with your saddlebags on these specific saddles to see how they fit, test out some tack, test some out of your position over terrain with this stuff. So it's a really good start. I recommend it. And of course, she has lots of other great tips too, like fitness training, mental training too, to just get yourself into the right headspace and to, be ready to deal with whatever may come your way. Because it's not just physical, it is a huge mental aspect as well. But to give you a more specific thing, the way I would train is, for example, I would do a jog or a run 3 times a week. You should be, I think, personally, able to run 5 to 10K at relative ease, because during the derbies, it's not just riding, you will be on foot a lot because of the terrain, to give your horse a break, to navigate, take breaks, maybe go somewhere else, help another rider. There's so many reasons and occasions where you will be on foot for prolonged periods of time, and you should be fit because it's not flat. Like, there's canyons and mountains and all this stuff, so be fit. I also did strength training about 3 times a week, 30 to 60 minutes, with moderate weights, like not maxing out the weight by any means, but definitely weight training and just get strong. Have a good core for sure. Be strong in your legs. Have good posture. Posture is really a big one. Posture and balance, because if you don't have balance, you will overstrain other muscles to keep you in a position, and that will tire you out much faster than if you have good balance. And one cool thing for that, which is what I got from Stevie again, I actually built a wobble board or a balance board. So you have a rectangle on top and then 2 half circles front and back made from whatever wood you have, and it's like one of these surf practice boards, and they're great to just practice your balance. And there's tons of stuff on YouTube as well that you can do with them, like, close your eyes, move your hands around, go up and down. It's all sorts of stuff out there. They're a really cool addition. I did lots of stretching and yoga as well. There's some really cool things online, again, all sorts of yoga challenges, or daily morning or evening or after workout yoga, or yoga for equestrians. Just go on YouTube, find something that you like, stick with it, make a plan, and there you go. And the thing that I really like about that as well is that it helps with recovery, of course. And also, there is a chance that you get bucked off during these races, and you want to be nimble and soft and supple enough to not hurt yourself more than maybe necessary, if that's the word you want to use. So you need to be able to bounce and tumble as well as possible, because there is a chance and people do get bucked off. So just for your own safety and health, look into stretching and flexibility as well, for sure. Another thing I really got into, because it was also people around me that were really into it, was the cold plunging or cold immersion. Stevie loves that stuff too. It's a huge mental aspect, and also for me, it was an aspect in recovery, because I have an old knee injury and I didn't want it to flare up. So after workouts, I would like to just, go do the cold immersion. And I think it supported my overall health. It reduces inflammation. It kickstarts your immune system. Definitely be careful with it. Don't overdo it initially because your system needs to get used to it. But once you do it regularly, it shows how much more resilient you become to the cold. And that's another point is there is a high chance, because it is Patagonia, it is in the mountains, that you get into some really cold weather, that you get wet, that you will not be warm and toasty every night. And it's important to learn to deal with the discomfort at a level that is realistic before you actually have to deal with it in the race. Because if you're not used to it, then that might be one of the things that break you during the race. Not even, the riding or the bronchi horse or the navigation. It might be simple stuff like that, that you're cold, you're not used to it, and then it just messes with your head and you're done. That has happened. What else? I made a list. I have 13 pages here, by the way, of scribbles. So there you go. Cold plunges, boot camps, boards. And another thing that I was lucky and privileged to do, which was fantastic. And again, huge thanks to Fernando and Sabine in Chile. I just randomly looked for endurance people in South America, so closer to the race location. And I found a place that looked really cool and just sent them a Facebook message and explained, okay, this is what I do. This is my job. This is my experience. This is what I'm planning on doing with this whole Gaucho Derby shenanigan. Can I come to you 3 weeks before the event and just ride as much as possible? And the message was pretty, yeah, sure. Yeah, you can come. Just let me know the dates closer to, whenever you're coming. And then, yeah, sure. So that was absolutely fantastic. I had a great time. This has nothing directly to do with the race, but that's something I did because, as I said, at the time, I didn't have the chance to get the endurance miles in I really wanted. I had done 50 milers, so 80-kilometer races before, but very sporadically. And I just wanted to be fitter and more used to the whole thing. And what was really great is that I came from Canadian winter. I came in January to sort of mid-northern Chile, just south of Santiago, where it is, in my Canadian view, boiling hot. So it was good to get used to the temperatures down there for sure, because it was way hotter than it ended up being for the Derby. And I do feel that was an advantage because everyone else, or a lot of people, came from the northern winter, and then it was a big change to get used to that climate. And I did feel that really helped me. So yeah, overall, whatever you do, you have to be fit. If you have a regular workout routine already and you have a pretty fairly active job or everyday life, that helps. But you still want to, I think, train more specifically for sure. And if you are someone who mostly works at a desk or has a more sedentary lifestyle right now, apart from the times you ride, you definitely want to ramp up your training because otherwise you will struggle for sure. Another question that came in was, how much is it and did you pay in full? Yes, I paid in full. No one gave me a discount. It was very sad. No, I'm joking. Yeah, it is a pricey project for sure. I'm not gonna lie about it. It is, when I did it, it was $16,000 US. So that's a decent price tag. In Canadian, that's roughly 20. I don't know what it is in euros right now. I did have some people supporting me and family helping me out a little bit here and there. I was also fortunate to be in a position where I had worked in a live-in position for the previous 3 years, so I didn't have to pay rent. A lot of times I didn't have to pay for food because we had a staff canteen as well. So that was very lucky, and I don't have a mortgage. I'm not paying off student debt or a car or anything else. I don't have children. That's another point. And I don't actually own horses, which are of course also expensive. So in that sense, a lot of things came together for me. Some people supported me. I dug into my savings, absolutely. But for me, it's also a once in a lifetime experience. I feel if I hadn't done it, I would have asked myself for the rest of my life how it would have been to do it. So for me, it was the right choice for sure. And I understand that it's not the same for everyone. Having said that, there were some riders on the race that got really good sponsor deals, that were really active. You know, they sent out 10, 20 emails every day to different brands, to different companies, to banks, airlines, like whatever. So that was fantastic, and they got really amazing deals, some of them, and that helps too, because it's not just the entry registration fee, it's the travel, it's the gear, it's the preparation. So yeah, it adds up. And there are no two ways about it. It's not possible for everyone. But luckily I was privileged and in a position to do it. And apart from people, helping me financially, I also got a cool sponsorship deal from Nomad Nutrition. They're a Canadian company and they make camping food, so a dried food that you add hot water to. And I had some contacts there through someone from work, and they were amazing. And they sent me a huge package with lots of different flavors and breakfast and main dishes. They are GMO free, vegan, lactose free, all the things you want, all the healthy stuff they are. So that was fantastic, because that's another thing. If you buy those, they're between 16 and 20 Canadian dollars per sachet or per package. And if you think that you need 3 to 4 per day plus snacks, that adds up, right? Another thing, sorry, I forgot about the fitness aspect, is that rider weight is limited. So that's another part when you're thinking fitness. It's limited to 185 pounds per rider, fully dressed. So including your boots or shoes, including your pants, your jacket, your helmet, that cannot be over 185 pounds, which especially for men is often a really close call, because they're just bigger, they have heavier bones, they're taller, right? For me, that was easy, but that's another thing to think about for sure. And I think there are a handful of male riders in our case that said, I had to lose some weight just to make rider weight. And then I trained specifically towards that. Equipment and gear. Okay, so there are a few items on here that are necessary that will be checked before the race. So if you don't have it, they won't let you out into the wilderness, because it's just a safety aspect. What you have to bring is minus 19 Celsius graded sleeping bag. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Is it zero? No, it's not zero. Is it zero? I can never tell. Just Google minus 19 Celsius to Fahrenheit. So that's what it needs to be, or more. You need to have a tent. You need to have something to lie on, like a thermarest. You need a bivy bag or a space blanket for emergency if your tent, for whatever reason, isn't working. You need a hydro pack, so a camelback or a backpack that carries a water bladder, and that is not counted in your weight. So if you make 185 pounds plus your 2 kilograms or whatever it is of your water bag, that's fine. You need a camping stove of whatever type. You need food, you need stirrups and fenders or stirrup leathers. So those are not coming with the saddle that they give you, because they're such heavy wear items that they say it doesn't really make sense for us to provide them every year and again and again. And they will just get torn and trashed probably, because of, you ride through bush, you get on and off, your horse jumps to the side as you try to get, like, all this stuff. So they're just, not bothering with that, which I think is fair. So you need fenders and stirrups. You have to wear a helmet. You have to bring your own saddlebags. You have the option of buying saddlebags that go with the same brand as the saddle is there. I didn't do that. Some people did. But you need to have some type of saddlebags, and all of this stuff together, plus any other items that you might want to put in, like a Leatherman or a lighter or paracord or whatever you choose, cannot be more than a total of 10 kilograms, which is 22 pounds. Which is not a lot. So a lot of people were packing and repacking the night before, slightly panicking. A lot of people brought their own little scales, hanging scales. Perfect. Thanks everyone who let me use theirs. And then in the morning, when you come to the weigh out station, they weighed it and that scale said something else, and then you had to repack again. So it was a little tense, but everybody made it eventually, so that's good. What the event provides, and what's also not counted into your rider weight or your equipment weight, is a saddle pad. Both of these are from Arandu. That is an Argentinian brand. They are located in Buenos Aires. You can check out their website. I'll put the website down in the description box. And the saddle they're using is kind of a hybrid Gaucho / endurance race saddle. It's not really like the traditional Gaucho saddle that is very complicated. It has multiple layers, multiple cinches. If you want to check out some of my other videos, I think I have a short where I show how all the layers go on. So it's not quite as complicated, but it's similar. So saddle and pad are provided. Then optionally, you can also take a woolen saddle blanket. I brought mine, but mostly just had it strapped in front of my saddle as a sort of almost like a bucking roll. And then if I needed it, if my thermarest had a hole, or I needed something else for a blanket, or if some horses maybe had a better saddle fit with an extra blanket, then I had it. So I decided to take it. They also give you a long lead line that is kind of like almost a seat belt material and thickness, so it feels like a seatbelt on a car, and is really long, has a heavy duty carabiner. And the reason they give you this is so that you can tie to some of these thorny, prickly bushes that you have in the pampas and in the grasslands, because there aren't always going to be corrals or trees, and you have to somehow make sure that your horse isn't just wandering off at night. So there is a way to cinch it really tight around a bush, and then when the horse pulls, it tightens itself, so it's not going to come undone. And they're all used to being what is called staked out, so that there's like a long line from their head collar to something on the ground, and then they can just eat and graze and circle around that. They're all used to that. It's a very common thing to do out there. Hobbles are also provided. I used my hobbles again for horses, so they wouldn't wander off at night. Again, very common. I felt not all of the horses were equally well hobble trained. I had one horse that I just wouldn't put the hobbles on for two reasons. First of all, because he was really stout with really thick cannon bones and really wide shoulders, and I feel like I couldn't even make them fit. Like I had it around one leg, and then the strap wasn't long enough to reach the other leg, so it was just too wide and thick. But also he was a little worried about it, so with that horse I decided not to hobble him. Every other horse was fine with it and didn't really bother. So that's another way of securing your horse. And they're surprisingly good at hopping around with those. You think like, oh my gosh, the poor animal, they're like stuck in one place now. And they just move both legs at a time and sort of jump over here, eat a little bit, jump over there, eat a little bit. And, in North America too, it's a very common backcountry practice. I know it's not up everyone's alley, but realistically, if you don't want to be stuck without a horse in the backcountry without anything to tie them to or keep them in, that's what you use. Okay. Head stalls, so halters are provided, bits and reins. You can bring your own reins, which some people have done. I was considering it, but I tried to pack as lightly as possible, which I don't think I ended up doing. I still brought a lot of stuff I didn't really need. But yeah, I didn't end up bringing my own reins, but if you have a set of reins that you really, really like, you can bring that. The halters are provided, the head stall, so the bridle or the head collar, and the bit are provided there, and you cannot swap those out. Those stay. You cannot bring your own bit or construction or whatever. They give you the bit and you ride with the bit. It's kind of like a gag. It's what you see at a lot of trail businesses. It's a single joint with small shanks. And there's many anecdotes of the pioneer races where people said, oh no, but I don't want to ride in this. I want to ride in a snaffle. And then they had no brakes. Because I think it's always important, and I'll get more into this later, to be aware and realistic of where you are and what you're doing, and also maybe of what perspective and bias you bring into the situation that just may not be applicable to all situations in all parts of the world. And even if you agree or disagree with some things, that's all fair and well, but the reality of a situation may sometimes require something else. Okay. And they also provide you with a GPS, so that's your Garmin navigation, where you move the cursor around and see your line and see your waypoint, so that little navigation device that you hook onto the front of your backpack. You get a little red Garmin InReach, that's your tracker, so they always know where you are. No shortcuts, no cutting out any waypoints, and definitely not riding over riding time, which is limited every day to make sure the horses are okay and you don't put yourself into danger when you can't see anything. And a power bank, so you can charge both. So you can charge the InReach. The GPS runs on batteries, and that's another thing you need to bring is lithium AA batteries, and they're very hard to come by in South America. I didn't look for it because I was told to bring them, so I just brought them all, and then you have it. And you want lithium, super long-lasting batteries because they run out pretty fast. And they do also check that you have those. So if you don't have them, somehow they need to organize something for you to have sufficient batteries. And yeah, for the InReach, You have a power bank. The InReach can connect to your phone, so you can almost use it like a text messaging device. So you can write a message on your phone in the app, and then the InReach via satellite sends it out to headquarters. But more on that in a little bit. For what I used, because people kept asking, so what did you use? How did you like it? Unless I say that I specifically didn't like something, I liked my gear, just so you know. Helmet, of course, as I said, is mandatory. I had the Troxel Liberty that I really love. I have it in teal. I love teal. I used to be everything teal. And put some stickers on the side. Everybody gets these stickers with their abbreviation. So the first letter of your first name and the last two letters of your last name. So you're identifiable from far ahead, regardless of color of your gear. And then you can put whatever stickers or thing, whatever you want on your helmet, but it has to be an actual riding helmet. No bike helmets, no nothing else, an actual rated riding helmet. Then I got some cheap sunglasses that I just bought in El Calafate because I had lost my other ones for like $7 or so. They weren't amazing, but they did the job. What some other people's got, I think from the big online shopping website that starts with A, are jockey goggles. So it's like a full-on enclosed polarized goggle thing that goes over your face with an elastic band in the back. And jockeys use them on the racetracks, and they're not cheap. They're like 20 US. So that's a good investment, I think. They looked really good, and people said they're really comfortable with it. A lot of people had like ski or ATV goggles. I had ATV goggles, which I didn't feel worked really well with my riding helmet because it came down lower than the goggles went up, and then it sort of pushed it down all the time. So that was a little annoying. But yeah, ski goggles or any kind of goggles are useful because the winds in Patagonia are not strong. They are not epic. They are, as people have said, biblical, and it's not an exaggeration. I don't personally have this phone, but I think both Warwick and Megan have videos of where they ride up a hill and the wind is sweeping their horses' ears straight to the side, and the horses are walking, bent like a banana, and the riders are like leaning against the wind just to not get pushed off. So that's how strong the winds can be. Not all the time, but yes, very strong winds, a lot of sand and dirt being kicked up. So you want something to protect your eyes, not just from the sun, but just wind, dirt, anything flying around. A buff or a scarf. I just had like a black little buff just to have something, or like a neck scarf or something you can put around your neck for sure. I had a base layer merino from Mons Royal that I really loved, that I got from Gearfix in Bend, Oregon. They are an amazing reused secondhand anything outdoorsy shop, and they have like special deal days and what have you. So if you're in the area, do check them out, or any other, secondhand reuse gear outlet is probably a good address. A fleece, a wool mid layer. So I had one zip up fleece and then another wool jumper in my saddlebag. I had Iridian, I ride on, no one's clear the pronunciation, riding breeches that are really nice that I got from the Riding Warehouse in the States. I got an Arc'teryx Atomic Windbreaker or Puffy. I got Helly Hansen coated rubber rain gear from their work gear line that I really loved. Having said that, they're amazing in torrential rain. The second the sun's out or it's not horrendously windy or it's not raining, you sweat because it's rubber. Like nothing goes in, nothing goes out. So bear that in mind. I had Salomon Gore-Tex hiking boots that I actually got off Marketplace for $80, which is not nothing, but way cheaper than they go for at the big, warehouses. So that was amazing. And I just put some gel insoles in for the cushioning, and they were fantastic. No blisters, no nothing. I was really, really happy with those ones. I got yellow buckskin gloves from Marks in Canada, so work gloves, work ranch gloves. I got a lot of dry bags from Sea to Summit. They were really good. Also a Sea to Summit compression sack for my sleeping bag because I didn't have one, and it packs it down really nice and small. For my camel bag, I had the Osprey Dyna Hydro Pack. I got it on sale. For my tent and Thermarest, I had a Thermarest from Thermarest, the insulated one, because if it gets cold, you don't just need a warm sleeping bag, you need some insulation from below. So I got an insulated Thermarest. And I got the MSR Ultralight for 2 people so that I have a bit more space. It has a vestibule. I got those through a pro deal from work, so that was great. Still not cheap, but a little better. I do really like those 2 products. I have a Jetboil, of course, as my camping stove, like many people. For my sleeping bag, I got a Mammoth 800 fill down sleeping bag, also from the Gear Fix in Bend, Oregon. Apparently they don't make the specific one anymore. Now with sleeping bags, the thing is, as I said, it needs to be rated -19. And actual down will just always be warmer. The problem with actual down is once it gets wet, you're pooped. Like, it just takes a long time to dry, to fluff up again, and then you lose the warmth. Whereas with the newer fibers, the synthetic down, you don't have that issue, but it's harder to reach that warmth in lower temperatures. So I went with an actual down 800 fill sleeping bag, and then just got the Sea to Summit compression sack, waterproof compression sack, that I thought was really a great combo, and it kept me really nice and toasty. Actually, some nights I got really warm and just had to not sleep in my sleeping bag because it was so hot, but also we were lucky with the weather. So, but you can't count on that. We were lucky with the weather, but it's not always like this for sure in Patagonia. For my saddlebags, I was actually freaking out about those for the longest time because I couldn't really make a decision. I had never really packed for super long times where I had to, give so much thought about saddlebags. I always had some flying around, and if something got wet, it wasn't the end of the world, so whatever. And now I had to really look into it, and I played around with different things, and I didn't love any of them really too much. A lot of people went with the motorcycle bags, so the ones that are almost like U-shaped, and then you strap them onto the saddle real tight, and they really loved those. I ended up going with something that was on sale on an online warehouse that my old workplace used to buy all their harness and wagon carriage horse stuff from. And the brand is called Amicel or Amicel, and they are nylon weatherproof saddlebags. I paid like 60 or 70 bucks for them, like close to nothing. Some of the big brands out there, they're closer to 300 and 400, just to give you an idea. I really like those because they are similar to a big brand that sells these sort of saddleback combos. But what I liked about the Amicel ones is that the cantle bag, so the one that sits behind your saddle, is actually a little smaller, so it's not as bulky. So when you mount and dismount, you're less likely to get hung up on those, and you can really strap it down so it's lower and closer to the saddle and not bouncing around so much. So I actually really like that. I enhanced it a little bit with extra gear straps and carabiners, because you want to be fast. If you fiddle around with a horse too much that is nervous and that you don't know and that's already not too eager to be saddled, you might have a bit of trouble getting everything on and staying safe. So I wanted everything to just be clip on, clip off, and then I could adjust it once it was off the horse. That worked really well. What I also did is, and I think that works for any brand of saddlebag that's out there, any of the little rings or fixtures that you have on there or snappers that are plastic, I swapped those out for metal, like these really, really thick double or triple key rings, and then another snapper or a carabiner, so that wouldn't break. Because the one thing that broke was actually one of those plastic snapper thingies. And then because I had the carabiners and the extra gear straps, that wasn't a problem, but just something to be aware of. And for my fenders and stirrups, I had the Barefoot Narrow Western or Endurance, it's the same model, fenders, and I was really happy with those. I was really comfortable with those. I always knew that I didn't want to go with just English leathers because I knew that they would probably sore up the inside of my shins, just from how I ride and what I've experienced in the past. So I knew I wanted fenders, and I tested those out with Stevie during the boot camps, and I really liked those, so that's what I went with. And for the stirrups, I actually got some stirrups that I borrowed from a friend and fellow rider who had those originally from Heidi, who was the Mongol Derby rider. So, they bounce around. And I don't even know the brand, but they're just they have really thick pads and footrests that are not squishy. So again, it's, a preference thing, but what a lot of people told me is when the footbed is really soft and squishy, what you end up doing is you have to balance the entire time, and that can make your shin and your foot really sore. So you actually want something that's more stable and a little harder, so your foot doesn't have to work overtime to balance. And then I did go with caged stirrups as well, because it's just a safety thing. You're out in the country riding, galloping over crazy terrain on horses that you don't really know, and even if they're nice, even if they're not, trying to bronc you off, there may be like a hole or something that you didn't see or whatever, and they just scoot to the side, and you really don't want to get stuck in the stirrup. And it's actually a requirement to have a cage stirrup if you ride in anything like trail runners or sneakers, which you can decide to do. I don't think anyone did. Everybody had a heel on their boot or shoe. But if you decide to ride in something flat like that, you need to have cage stirrups. They won't let you ride otherwise. And I think most people went with cage stirrups anyway, and those who didn't had a heel on their boot, so that didn't really matter. And as I said, for food, I got the full palette from Nomad Nutrition. That was super cool. So I actually didn't just get the meal packages. I also got something called banana bites. So they're like, they're not freeze dried, but they're dehydrated in a special process called rev dry. So they are dry, so they don't go bad, but they're still squishy. And full disclosure, I actually ended up snacking away all of those before the actual race because they're just so good. So yeah, for your next camping trip, maybe check out Nomad Nutrition. They have some really cool stuff. And what else? I mentioned the lithium batteries. You do want to bring an extra power bank for your phone so that you can use it in combination with the InReach to write messages or contact them in case of emergency. Or also, if you want to take lots of pictures and videos. And I didn't end up doing that lots because I usually had both hands full dealing with my horse and the GPS and the terrain and the gear. Some people brought GoPros, which I initially thought was a little overkill, but looking back, I wish I had brought GoPros because the places you go are just so crazy, and chances are you're never going to be there again, and you're doing pretty amazing, epic, cool stuff there. And 20, 30, 40, whatever many years from now, you're going to look back, and if you have these videos, you're going to be like, yeah, that was great, and just great to relive it again. So if that's something you're considering, and you have the spare change for, I'd say absolutely go for it. That would be amazing. Toe warmers. I got toe warmers from my friend Heidi. She gave me some little extra gifts and bits and bobs just before the race because she actually drove me to the airport. So thank you again so much for that. Toe warmers were great. I used them not during the race, but at some other point. Again, as I said, the weather was really good during the race, so I didn't really need them. But if it had rained or if it had been colder, and there's always a chance in the mountains in Patagonia that the weather is not going to be just splendid, they would have been really useful. So they're a good thing to have. Bring a lighter. You need to light your camp stove somehow. The little ignition, Pezio, wears out really quick, so do bring a lighter. Paracord. All the paracord, make it a bracelet if you can spare the weight on your rider weight. Put paracord carabiners on everything. They're just so useful. Super glue for both first aid and just fixing whatever. I brought a small first aid kit myself. I probably had more than I needed, but I also ended up giving a lot of stuff to other people who had maybe pulled a muscle or done something. I had Voltaren, I had painkillers, I had bandages for all sorts of small things that you can bandage and wrap. Of course, extra socks and undies. So here's something I did that people strongly advised me against. It worked out for me. So I didn't bring undies and socks for all 10 days. Not gonna lie. But I wasn't gross either, because what I did, I was always changing it around, and then while I was riding in the morning, I would just, there's always water, by the way. You're always near a stream or a river or something, because you have to for your horses. That's a requirement. They do want you to be next to water overnight, so your horse has access to water. And I would just, in the river, like really strongly and with some rubbing, wash my undies and socks in clear, beautiful mountain water. And then I would clip it with one of my extra carabiners to the back of my backpack and just ride along in the wind at speed. And Patagonian wind dries everything. Of course, I could have backfired if it had poured all the time. I would have had no dry underwear, no time. It worked out. It was a risk I took. They strongly recommend against it. Maybe it doesn't look so cool in the pictures. I've never seen a picture of me with my undies flying behind me on my backpack. backpack, but that's what I did, and it worked for me. So just saying. Um, Gear straps, as I said, for the saddlebags and everything. A few extra things for your first aid kit that are really useful. Imodium, because you're likely to get the grumbly tummies for whatever reason. Some people are just more sensitive. Maybe you picked something up in the dirt that's in the ground there. The bacteria are just different to the way they are at home and what your gut is used to. Grumbly tummies are a thing, and you don't want to be dealing with that while you ride. I got the stomach flu right after the race, really, really badly for like 5 days. I was flat out in bed. But yeah, bear that in mind. That's a high possibility, and you do want to have something that can at least alleviate the worst while you're riding. Afterbite, I had it. I never had to use it. I don't think anyone else did have to. Antihistamine, I think that's a big one. You just never know what you might be allergic to, especially in an environment you're not used to, right? Ibuprofen and Voltaren. So that's what I packed. Be aware that there is a medics team at every checkpoint. They are very well equipped. If they don't have something, they will radio you. They will radio the other station and then make sure it gets to you. And if it's an emergency, they will bring it to you. If it's something you can, push back a little bit, they will tell you, okay, ride to this next station. They have that. So they do take really good care of you. I always felt like they really looked after the riders. They were really well prepared. There was never a moment personally where I felt that it wasn't medically safe to do the things we were doing. And another thing that you have, because we just talked about all the equipment and the weight restrictions, are resupply bags. So that's really cool. And that's something I didn't really have on the radar, even though it said in the race description, but I got too excited with other stuff, I guess. You get resupply bags up to 2 kilograms at 4 different stations throughout the ride. So every station is a vet check. I'll explain more later. And there are 20 total, including the first one at the start. And at 4 of those, they are predetermined. You can't choose which one. But let's say, I forgot which one. Let's say at check 4, 8, 12, and 16. There will be resupply bags, and you can number them. You can say, this is for resupply 1, this is for resupply 2, this is for 3. So you can put technically whatever you want in there, but of course it's good to be strategic. So here's what I put in my resupply bags. Food, snacks, like definitely little, like cereal bars, energy bars, little chocolates, little pick-me-ups. I had some trinkets, extra socks, and the biggest one for me in one of them, brand dropping here, I put a Coca-Cola in one. Oh, it's just the best Coca-Cola I've ever had. I'm not gonna lie. I had little trinkets and pick-me-ups. I had a braided strand of horsehair from 4 different horses that I had back at my old workplace, and so that they would be as strong as the draft horse, as sweet as the quarter horse, as fast as the race horse, and as brave as the fjord. And I braided them all together, and I put that on the back of my backpack with the undies. Anyway, so that was my lucky charm. And I had some little stones for good energy, very little ones because you don't have a lot of weight to spare, but I brought, some stuff, and that's up to you. Whatever helps you, whatever is a good pick-me-up for you, whatever lifts your spirits. And then the other thing that I also brought are letters from friends and family. That's actually something the management sent us an email about beforehand. That's a cool thing to do, is have your friends and family write you letters and why they think you're awesome and why you can do this and all of this stuff, and then put it in your gear or your resupply bags. And then maybe if you're like halfway through and you're like, it's such a drag, it's so hard, this is just such a you will get there. Everybody gets there. You have these little motivational letters that are really, really great. I had a bunch of people write me some. That was really cool. That was really awesome. All right, my experience. So now some fun things, more or less. Pre-race. So we actually all met in El Calafate, which is a very famous starting point for lots of tours in tours for English. For tours and events in Patagonia, in Argentina. So that's where we met. And then the following day, we drove in a big bus, 8 hours north of Calafate. So that was a big day. And we were greeted by a Gaucho ride-up. We were pulling into the estancia, and all of a sudden there's just these riders like bolting up behind us, like, woo! That was pretty fantastic. Some people took some really cool videos of that. I think it's on the Gaucho Derby Instagram as well, so that's super cool. Got a big hello, a big welcome, a sort of parade where they all line up, on their horses with their gear and their hats and everything. That was really cool. And yeah, so that's where pre-race camp started. So you don't just get put there and off you go. You actually have 3 days of preparation where they go over organizational stuff, operational stuff, safety, emergency, lots of other things. And I have to say, initially, after, the big travel there and then the 8 hours drive north of El Calafate, I was like, is this really necessary? Like, can't we just go and ride? Like, I've trained for so long and I have all my stuff. And I mean, not in a bad way, but I felt like I wanted to go. I was sort of, really antsy to just get started. And I felt like it got pushed back by that it was a little wired. But, big but, I do feel it was a super good thing to have and super helpful. And I'll talk a little bit about it now. But yeah, looking back, super grateful that we got to do this, especially because my first test ride during the pre-race camp was, for me, horrendous. Like, I felt so bad and out of my depth. I felt like actually walking up to Eric and Stevie and Holly and be like, oh, sorry, actually I lied. I actually don't really know how to ride a horse. Sorry. So, yeah, so we get to the camp. And we go over the rules and regulations. So what is allowed, what isn't allowed, how the penalties work if you ride overtime or your horse doesn't pulse down during the vet check and all this stuff. Maps and navigation. So we go over the route, where the points are. Also, sometimes there's private land where you're not allowed to go or where it's dangerous to go. So they point all of this stuff out beforehand too. This makes it sound like it's very obvious and easy once you're in the country and you navigate. It's not. And they go over communication, so how to use your InReach, how to use your phone that's hooked up to your InReach, emergency and evacuation procedures if something severe were to happen, vet check procedures, how your horse gets vetted, what the rules are, what the cutoff limits are, what the penalties are if you don't hit the mark. And also gear check and verification and test rides. So they, as I said earlier, there's certain things you need to have, and they do check. So you can't just cheat and be like, oh, I don't need a sleeping bag. I'll just bring, I'll just wear my clothes in my tent or stuff like that. Does not work. You need those things. The first test ride, as I said, was technically easy because we were just riding out of the estancia down a hill to a point that we had in our navigational gizmo, so our GPS, and literally just down a straight line down the hill and coming back up. So in terms of navigation and terrain, it was fairly easy. He was not bad or dangerous, but he was just like this, and I felt like on a jackhammer. Like, he, in my opinion, at that point, he was not comfortable. And I had tried the Gaucho Derby race saddles before. It's just something notification. I had tried those before, and when I tried them at Stevie's, I really liked them. And then I was on this horse over terrain in a group going a little faster, and all of a sudden I just didn't know how to sit on a horse in that saddle anymore. It just felt terrible. I felt like if this horse scoots to the side now, he's gonna, I'm gonna get jolted out of the saddle. And that was really a moment where I thought, what am I doing? This was a bad idea. I should not be here if this is just such an easy test ride and I already feel so terrible. So that was very humbling and frustrating for me personally. Yeah, so I did not feel good about it. Then once we turned around, I put my horse in the front, and he was much happier about that. Obviously, he was going home, but he felt more relaxed in the front. So sometimes that's the issue, just put that horse in the front, you'll be better. And we trotted and cantered, and then it was all good. But still, I walked away from that first ride like, all right, like, easy now. Then on the second day, we had another test ride, and that horse I had was just such a cool guy, sturdy, calm, didn't care, just went, cantered, trotted up the hill, whatever. Wonderful. Funnily enough, my friend Heidi, another Heidi, she had the opposite experience. Her first ride was great, and then on the second day, she was on a horse where she's like, how do I even ride? Like, nothing feels good right now. So, that's part of the deal that you sign up to. Like, you just take whatever you get and then somehow make it work as good as you can. And sometimes that's better, and sometimes it's not so good. And then the third ride was also great, and we tested more of our gear and put the saddlebags on and tested our wind and rain gear and all this stuff. And then at the end, there was a big asado, so a Patagonian barbecue and a dance and a party and a fiesta, and it was really cool. So as I said, looking back, I think those 3 days pre-race training were really good. So for those of you who decide to sign up and you get there and you're like, why do I have to go over this? Like I read it all in the description and I trained at home. Trust me, you want that. It's good to have. All right, race start. So everyone sort of went out and got their bags checked and weighed. And they do check, by the way, that you have nothing in your pockets. So no sneaking away extra food or something in your rider weight, because you weigh out before and they know your weight. And then if you put something else in your pocket, that's not allowed. And you get called up in groups of, I think it was 4 or 5, to get your horse out of the corral, tack him up, get on, because there was limited space in that area where we were. So it wasn't possible for everyone to get on at the same time. So they called us out in groups. My horse was a really good guy, but he didn't love standing still. It was more of a hop on and go situation, which is common. I don't want to generalize, because just like here or like in North America, Europe, or wherever you go, horse people have different opinions about different things, and this place does it different from that place, and they have their opinions and methods and yada yada. But I felt a lot of the time that the horses were used to the rider getting on and then, okay, we're going, because they're workhorses. And we were told before too that in a lot of places, people would consider a horse that you get on and he stands dead still not necessarily well trained, but lazy, because they say, well, where's his work drive? Why doesn't he want to go? Right? So that was certainly interesting, because we came in waves to tack up and mount our horses. And then, of course, because of that, a lot of people had to wait until everybody was on. And then the horses get all antsy, because they're like, why are we standing around here? Why are there so many horses with so many riders and just standing around and doing nothing? Why aren't we going? When are we going? And, it really charges up the energy. And of course, the riders are super excited, because now is go time. Like, they know the race is about to start. It's not just a little bumbly ride of 2 hours. Like, this is the thing. So the atmosphere is certainly charged. And my horse was super good, but I could feel him get antsy, even though he was good. Like, some other people had their hands way fuller than me. My friend Heidi had a horse that was a little tricky to mount. He was really, really nervous and wired, and really tall guy. And she later said, when we were riding, I was like, how's your horse? And she said, yep, definitely a two-hander. So she literally had her hands full. It was just full of adrenaline. I don't know if you ever had that. I sometimes get that on horses. I get adrenaline legs, like when nothing has technically happened, but you just have your leg in the stirrup and it's sort of doing this. I had that. My horse was super good about it. 2 people actually got tossed off before even the start. One lady, I think, just sort of the saddle came a little loose and then she sort of slipped and fell down. And another guy got bucked off big time, and the horse just bolted out of the gate into the hills with saddlebags flapping. Like, oh, great. And I'll come back to this later, but within less than 15 seconds, I've never seen anything like this. This happened. So someone came off, the horse ran away. Of course, the medics checked on the rider. And some gaucho just ran past me, was like, excuse me, just pulled out a saddle, flung it on a spare horse that was standing around, put the bridle on, jumped on, didn't even have stirrups on his saddle, and just bolted at the same breakneck speed out of the gate to get that horse. And I thought, oh, great, so now he's gonna die too? Like, that's amazing. I've seen lots of really good gutsy riders. What I've seen in Patagonia, I feel, is on a different level. The only thing I could potentially compare to, in my experience, is Indian relay. If you don't know what that is, look it up. It's very popular on the rodeo circuit, especially in Canada, I think. But I'm sure there's lots in the States as well. I don't know. I just live in Canada. But yeah, that's gutsiness on another level. And the terrain there is not smooth. It's like grass bushels and sandy holes and ups and downs. And that's some skill. like regardless of what you think otherwise, but that you gotta give it to those guys just for the gutsiness for sure. So that happened, but then everybody was on their horses. And then we were walking towards the starting line, which wasn't directly at the estancia, but just sort of just up a hill, you know, where it was clear and open. And if a horse ran away or spooked to the side, it wouldn't end up in the fence or a tractor or whatever there is. And to make it look proper and dramatic, of course, there were these 2x3 big sort of banners flapping in the Patagonian wind with Gaucho Derby on it, which looks super cool in the pictures and videos. But you know how well a lot of horses and flags go together. Not well. Some horses were just really eager to go. My horse did not love the flags. He was sort of trying to spin and pull back and spin around. And then, of course, one of the flags sort of half fell over and was being blown towards us. Luckily, someone caught it. Thank you, whoever that was. So that was interesting. And you basically had 40 wired people on 40 wired horses. And I talked to my friend Heidi and my friend John, who they come as a package. And I asked them just before, I was like, so what's the plan here? Because my horse is like a little nervous and he tries to spin away from the banners, and I'm not planning on dying today. And Heidi's horse was pretty hot. John seemed pretty cool. I don't know if he was cool, but he seemed pretty cool, like always, really. And they both said, yeah, that sounds like a great plan to not get unalived right on the first day. So we actually hung back, and a lot of people, you know, they sort of bolted across the starting line and just like went thundering down the hill. And we said, yeah, let's walk. And we literally walked the first few minutes until the field had sort of spread out a bit more, which I think was good. Our horses calmed down a little bit. And I think there's even a picture where you see the field sort of galloping off and there's like us three little blobs in the back. But of course, as you know, when horses see other horses running away in front of them, they kind of want to catch up. So once, you know, we went past the banners, past the scary flappy things, and that was all good, then we sort of started going into a canter and getting up speed, and they were really good. It took me a little bit for sure to find a groove with my horse and the terrain and everything, because yes, we had practiced, yes, we had test rides, but as everyone who competes knows, like, it's always a different thing when you're actually in it. And just with a huge field and the draw, the horses were much faster than during any training ride I had done over terrain. And of course, I also hadn't ridden that horse during a training ride. It was the horse I had drawn on the day. So it took me a little bit to find my seat, to find my position, to really feel out how he moves over terrain, how he jumps some little bushes and this and that, because you don't stop, like, you go. And after a little bit, that was good. And then it was fun. And then we caught up with the field, and there was, you know, some river crossings and stuff where the first people slowed down, and then we caught up with them, and there's some gates and this and that. And then it was fun. Then it was cool. I think I have a video somewhere too, if you want to check out my shorts, not what I wear, the short videos, okay? On my account, where we're riding up the hill, and yeah, there's Nicolas, I think, is next to me, and then Emmanuel on the other side, and mountains and rivers, and then it was gorgeous. Then it was fun. Then it was really cool. And we basically arrived at the first wet check more or less together at the first vet check. And during the first and second vet check, they actually allowed us to leave the horses tacked. Normally, during each vet check, you have to take the saddle off, the saddlebags off, bridle off, just halter on, to do like the trot there and back for them to make sure there's no lameness and nothing. But just to move the field along and get everyone through during the first two stations, they allowed you to leave your horse tacked, and they still took the pulse and the breathing rate and the hydration levels. And yeah, that was good. Then it was fun. And yeah, so more to the vet checks and horse stations. That's what a lot of people ask too. So every marked stop or waypoint on your GPS Garmin that is programmed in there before the race, so you can always see, you know, okay, next one, deep, and then it shows you the line to where you're supposed to go. Not the navigation, because it just goes as the crow flies. You might have to go around a river bend or across a mountain or whatever's there, or through a gate in a fence. Don't get me started on fences. So yeah, but every waypoint that you program in there, apart from two stops where it was what they call a route marker, just to keep you away from private property to go a certain way. Other than those two, every point is a vet check. So your horse gets checked roughly every 20 to 30 kilometers or so. And then I don't want to lie, usually every third or so vet check is also a horse station. Third or fourth vet check is a horse station where you swap out the horse. So you get a new horse and you draw out of a hat. You don't get to choose. You just draw a number and then that's your horse. But more on that later. And yeah, so the horses usually do 2 days max of 50-ish, maybe a little more kilometers per day. So you can tell from that it's not as fast as a usual endurance race because it's over terrain. It involves navigation. It involves you getting lost. It involves you having to help another rider. It involves you maybe having to wait at the vet check because there's other people in front of you. So it's more like a mounted, timed, orienteering backcountry survival event. And that's something I was aware of beforehand and what I really liked. And some people like that, some people didn't like that. Different opinions, different experiences. I thought it was really cool, but if you think it's just going to be like an endurance race that you normally ride, not so much. And yeah, I actually traveled Argentina and Chile for 2.5 months after the race, which wasn't the plan, but worked out really well and was really awesome. And I actually ended up meeting a bunch of people who turned out to be the providers of horses for the race, or who worked, with the landowners or organization locally. And, they showed me the pictures of like, oh yeah, here, I have this entire folder on my phone with like 20, 30 different horses. And this is number 451. And he's a really good horse. So it was really cool to meet the people and to accidentally almost get a glimpse behind the scenes and how the selection process works. So the team from the Equestrianist comes out there, they talk to the landowners to have permission to ride, they talk to different estancias to source all the horses, and then they go and vet all the horses. They number them. Okay, this is this horse, this is this number, this is the description, this is the age, this is the medical status, this is the examinations that were done. So I think it's really thorough, especially given how remote it is, how much of a cultural difference there still is, and what people look for in a horse, what people want in a horse. So that's not always easy. And also bear in mind, those people, yes, they get paid, but they give us their horses in large numbers. And, just ask yourself, like, would you give your own horse to some foreigner tourist that has a different cultural background, a different riding background? You don't know how good or bad of a rider they are, and then they're like, hey, I want to race your horse through the mountains for 2 days. Would you do it? I'm not sure I would do it. So I have huge respect and gratitude for that, for sure. And yeah, so back to the, yeah, so and as I said, it's 40 riders, 40 riders, and it's a total of, including the initial starting line, 7 horse stations. So you get 7 horses throughout the race. So 7 times 40 is 280. You need some spare, so you're probably thinking more like 300 or so, 300 plus horses that have to be distributed over 7 stations that don't all come from the same place. Maybe this guy provides 10 horses, this guy provides 5 horses, this guy provides 30 horses, and then you have to jumble them all around. So you can imagine the logistics of it all, which is insane. Yeah, so they try to leave them in their groups of origin. So if 10 horses come from one estancia, they try to keep them together so they don't, freak out too much, and so that it's not too much new stuff, because there's a lot of new stuff. But it doesn't always work. So sometimes, 2 horses of this group need to go there and to the next station, and then they get trucked from here to there. They're in a new place that most likely they haven't been before. They're with new horses that they haven't met before. They have riders, us, that wear completely different things, that ride different. The Gaucho Derby saddle is similar to a traditional saddle, but it's not the same. So I'm sure it feels different on their back too. And there's just all of these things that I think you need to bear in mind when you judge any of the stuff that you experience and see during the event. Yes. So yeah, and then every vet check, as I said, usually has you pull off the saddle and the tack and everything, and then they check for the same things that they would check during a normal endurance race: so respiration, heart rate, hydration, lameness, any pain points. Then you have your vet card that you can't lose. It's a penalty of 2 hours, I think, if you lose it, because it's a pain in the to rewrite everything once it gets lost. And it has your results from each vet check. It has the name and number of your horse. It has any penalties that you may have incurred, and your in and out time of the station. So they keep track of your riding time that way as well. Now, for the horses, I already talked about the horses. So, as I said, 40 riders need 7 horses, so around 300. And again, I felt really privileged that people provide us their horses to begin with, because I think that's a huge deposit and trust. And I felt really lucky with the horses that I drew. Of course, some were calmer than others, and I wouldn't want. With some of them, I couldn't mount them without assistance, at least the first time, because they were just really wired. With some of them, I didn't initially feel super sure about them, because you never know, right? Even you don't know if he's just a little nervous because of the situation, or if he's generally a very thin-skinned, reactive horse. You know that after some time after you ride. But I found with most of them, or at least the ones I drew, is that they're really antsy in the beginning. Also, I'm sure due to the environment and everything being different. And because they're used to, a lot of them, I think, are used to being, mounted and then let's go. And that's what they expect. So the more you fuss and the more you try to make them stand still, or the longer you take with your saddlebags or whatever, the antsier they get, because they're like, why is this taking so long? Aren't we supposed to be running right now? And I think that's part of the issues some people may have had with their horses before mounting or during mounting or just at the station, is because the horse just gets so anxious to go. And then it takes so long, plus everything being different, that leads to a lot of reactiveness that's not necessarily down to training or the disposition of the horse. They're just overwhelmed, because a lot of stuff is just different from what they know. I did redraw, so elect to not take the horse whose number I pulled, but put that number back and take a different horse twice. One was a really sweet little Palomino that looked lovely. I didn't worry about him being a bad horse or anything, but he had a really pronounced spine and withers, and I felt like with the way the saddle that we had was shaped, it was more like wide and flat. I felt like it wouldn't be good for him to have that saddle on him necessarily. I didn't even try. I just saw him running around the corral and I was like, oh, that's my horse. And I thought, I don't know. And he had a pretty, I wouldn't say sway back, but he had way more rock in his back than the saddle had that we had, that we were given. So I spoke to the vet, Anna, and I was like, look, I think he's a nice horse, but I'm just not sure this is going to work really well with the saddle and just distributing the weight that way. And she said, yeah, that's fine. You can redraw if you want to. And I did, and that horse was great. And funnily enough, someone else ended up drawing that little Palomino horse after me, because the number goes back in the hat or the box. And that's exactly what they complain about, is that they had to readjust the saddle all the time, that it didn't really work, didn't really fit, was sliding back and forwards. And I was like, yeah, it's what it looks like. But yeah, that's, the luck of the draw. And then you can elect to draw another horse, but then you get pushed back to the end of the line. So you have to wait until everybody else has drawn their first horse, and then you can draw again whatever is left. It's just, it's fairness, because other people went with what they had, so they gave it a go. You decided to not, that's fine. But then, yeah, you get to the end of the line, which I think is fair. And then the other horse I redrew was a small little, almost solid piebald paint, almost entirely black, with some white on his feet and a white patch on his belly. And he seemed super cute. Again, I didn't feel like this was an inherently bad, quote unquote, or dangerous horse, but he was so worried. And he did this thing, if you're a horse person, you know what I mean. Like, I made the wrong move that just startled him or whatever, and he didn't just get startled, he sort of sucked back. Yeah, just like my phone right now. Please hold. Technical difficulties. I was a little too energetic there. So he sucked back. He had this sort of, and if you're a horse person and you've seen enough things, you know that after back comes up. And I was like, this horse feels like it might explode at some point. Maybe not right now, but he's just very, like, just not that just being startled, but how he reacts to being startled. And I felt like he would be a candidate that would go up and flip and turn and whatever. I tried a little bit with him. I managed to get the saddle on. I managed to get the saddlebags on. I just walked around with him a little bit, like rubbed him down and made sure that, I could touch him in lots of spots, and he knew that nothing bad was going to happen to him. Sort of had him try to lower his head a little bit and just relax and get into a more relaxed state, which somewhat worked. But every time I thought, I was like, oh, okay, now he's good, or at least better, or he sees that I'm not getting after him, I just pulled my hand out of my pocket or my elbow made a move and he sucked back just as bad as in the beginning. And that was a point where I was like, this is not worth it, because it's not just reactive, but this is the kind of horse who I think maybe is not going to look after himself, and when he's in a tricky situation, he's not going to try to look towards you and be like, so what are we doing? He's just going to try and save his bacon, come whatever may, and you might get hurt in the process. And it made me feel really bad at the moment for him, even though I know horses don't think that way, but I felt like I was rejecting him because I'd already tried to work with him a little bit and get him to settle down and get him to relax, and it still wasn't working. And I know this is maybe trying to anthropomorphize English, an animal, but I didn't want him to feel like, you're no good, because that's not what I meant. I just felt like I can't make this safe for you. This is not working. And the other thing too is that, we all have this thing about how horses and riding and what we can do, or if we feel we can do or should be able to do, is a big part of our personality and identity as horse people. And then when you bump into something where you're like, I can't do this. I'm not capable of fixing it and making it good for this horse right now. Maybe it's different for other people, but to me, it really gets to me because it's sort of I don't know, it's knowing your boundaries. But for me, it always feels like I'm coming up short as a horse person, kind of, or I don't have the skill to just make any horse comfortable and be able to canter bareback into the sunset no matter what issues they have, like that sort of thing, which isn't exaggeration, but I think there's part of a lot of horse people's mind that sort of has that line of thinking in them. And so, yeah, I was disappointed with myself because I knew it was the right thing to do, but I also wish that I was better than I am, or braver, or more skilled, or more experienced. But I also knew that in that moment I wasn't, and that it would have ended badly. So I decided to redraw this horse. And I don't have proof. I never saw a picture, but I'm pretty damn sure that Dan from Double Dan Horsemanship, who was also in the race, who is an incredibly experienced cowboy and rider and colt starter and horsemanship person, and he's seen it all, he's ridden it all. If he has problems with something, then there's probably seriously something up. And he drew a horse from that station, and I do believe, Dan, you correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was that little horse with a white patch on his belly. And to a little bit into the race after that horse station, he got bucked off and his horse legged it home, and Dan had to walk on foot 2 hours back to the horse station. And again, I never saw a picture of that horse from Dan's side, so maybe it wasn't the same horse, but it sounds like it could have been that guy. And I was like, well, if Dan gets bucked off, then I had no business being on this horse, so that kind of made me feel a little better. But yeah. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the horses that I did draw. English is my third language, so forgive me. Number one, the starting line horse. I gave my horses names. They don't have names, but I gave them names. Number one was Mágico, or Magical, or the Magician. So he was a gray, and he was initially a little nervous at the starting line, but then he was so fun and good, and he led us into the last vet station for the day and was super sure-footed and happy to just have this rolling, never-ending canter up the slopes. Fantastic guy. And turned out he was one of the vet's horses, so no pressure, And then the second guy was also a gray. I later called him Braveheart. He was very skittish in the beginning, hard to catch, kept running away. As I said, also gray, but really tall, chunky. I saw pictures after, and in the pictures, he doesn't look nearly as massive as he did in person, but he has this really wide barrel and chest and this really deep neck and thick cannon bones, almost like a Warlander. So some drafty thing in there for sure. This Roman nose, almost like a Lusitano, like a Portuguese horse. Beautiful guy. Had cuts and scars all over that looked a little older, and that looked very typical to, maybe getting stuck in a fence, which can happen out there because there's fences everywhere. People leave wire. It's just the reality of the country there, and it looks to me like he got stuck in a fence at some point because he had some scratches over his face, a lot around the legs, and he hated being hobbled. Because first I thought, oh, he's a little skittish, that's okay. I put the hobbles on so at least I can have him in one place and just make sure that he knows it's fine and I can saddle him. He would not have the hobbles at all, like no chance in hell. I was like, okay. I needed John to actually hold him while I tacked him up because I didn't feel comfortable tying him up because he kept pulling away with his head. It was too complicated to have the gear and the saddlebag and everything while also holding him because he kept circling around me. So he was very, very prancy and snorty, and I was like, oh god. And he was tall. He was a tall dude. Again, if he used to German warm bloods, maybe not, but to me he looked tall. And he was also hard to mount because you have to think too that mounting is not just the way you mount with whatever you ride at home. You have your gear on you, so your camelback that changes your balance a little bit. You have, in my case, your hiking boots, so they are heavier than your normal riding footwear, like your riding boots or whatever you have, so you're not as quick. And you have all the saddlebags and the gear behind too, so it's less of a whoop on, but it's more like a in most cases anyway. So I tried to find a little bit of a slope where I could park him, but the second I grabbed the reins on his neck, he like pulled back and spun away, and I was like, well, that's gonna be interesting. And he was getting really antsy, and my friends Heidi and John were already on their horses, and I thought, you know what, this is just not gonna work. Let's just walk out. I'll walk on foot, whatever. Let's just get out of this whole like charged situation at the vet station and people mounting, dismounting, waiting for things, trying to get new horses. It's a lot of energy. And I said, let's just walk away from it a little bit and see how that goes. And we found, or I found like a little bit of a bank, and then Heidi just rode up behind me and very slyly sort of grabbed the outside rein of my horse, and I just climbed up behind him and whoop, and I was on, and then it was good. And then we cantered for a bit. He was very happy to go forward and very I was like, okay. And he was wide with big neck, big motions. And then we veered off the road into some of these grass bushely hills at a canter. And I kid you not, like for the first 10 minutes on these slopes, he jumped every single bush. Luckily, he was really comfortable, so it wasn't being, yeeted out of the saddle, but it was definitely a, okay. And, what I like to call the holy shit handle moment. So what I did with my hobbles, and a lot of other riders did it too, while I was riding, I put them through the 2D rings at the pommel of the saddle, and then had like an extra strap, because the Gaucho saddle you can put your hand into the pommel too, but it doesn't really, you can't really grip it that well, so you have this extra handle. And I was like, oh my god, I feel so bad for doing this, but it's just a safety thing, and for my mind too, to have something there if I need it, or if I have a spicy horse. And then I looked around, and a lot of riders did that too. A lot of riders who, are pros or earning their money with horses full time. And I thought, okay, then I feel less shame now. And this guy, yeah, initially he was snorty and nervous and worried. And then he just turned into such a beast uphill on steep stuff. He was phenomenal. I wrote up some stuff, was like, yeah, it's over here. Let's go and navigate over here. And he was just so eager to go that I was eager to go. And then he just ate up those hills. And I looked behind me, and Heidi and John were on foot, just looking at me in disbelief. Like, are you insane? Like, get off your horse and lead. But I trusted him because he was really confident, and he had the build to just plow up these slopes, and that was fantastic, and he was amazing. And then later we were in a forest, and he navigated through there too, and he was so sweet. And then on the track he was great, dismounting and mounting, no problem. And yeah, just very sweet natured, and he did so well with a lot of challenging terrain that day, and that's why I called him Braveheart. And then my third horse was Big Red, because he was, guess what, big and red. He looked like he had some Hackney in him, like really tall, lanky, big head. And yeah, red. And he was a really, really cool guy. He was super chill getting caught and waiting tied up to the fence, because he actually waited for a while, because at that horse station, the people I rode with, Heidi and John, they both drew really, really tricky horses, like the one that I described earlier that I drew that I ended up not riding. Kind of like that, but John's horse even bigger, like a pretty tall, lanky guy. And same thing, like you thought you had them, you thought it was okay, and then you made a move and up they go, and they really tried. And I stood there too, because we rode together, and yeah, I could have ridden off with other people, but that's not the point of the event and riding with friends. So I, helped them, like let them around while they put this, or held the horse while they put the saddle on, while they put the saddlebags on, same as John had done for me. Um, and they really tried with these guys, but again, like you made the wrong move and off they went again. And then John even tried to just mount Heidi's horse because she was a little worried. She had mounted him without saddlebags. That was kind of okay, and I helped her like leading him around a little bit, and he was good but still twitchy. And then he had the saddlebags on. He seemed okay. And then John was like, you know what? Like, I bounce. I'm pretty, I'm pretty nimble. John is like a cat. Like, this is just insane. He's just super, super flexible and fast and nimble. So he's like, okay, I can just mount it first and see how it goes. And yeah, he had a foot in the stirrup, pushed off the ground, and boo, horse exploded. He got pushed to the side. Luckily, didn't hurt himself. And that's when they both decided, that's just not going to work. And then they redrew horses there. But yeah, so Big Red was just waiting, like half falling asleep. Just such a cool dude. Da, 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 da. And then once we got on, like all the horses that I described, then he got goey. Then he was awake. I was like, oh, okay, we're going. And he's a big, tall dude. He has this huge, sort of ambling, weird stride at a canter where I, again, held onto my hand and I was like, I'm not sure I'm loving this. Like, he's not doing anything super bad, but there's a lot of motion going on and I'm struggling to like go with it smoothly. But then after some time, he was just so great and was really sweet and really patient with me too when we got stuck in the Satan's Arboretum or the Forest of Horrors. I'll talk more about it later. He was just a good guy. He was struggling too because it was really steep up and down, and he has these really long legs, and that's hard for them, right? They're more made for the flat out fast. But he was so sweet. I was annoyed with him sometimes because he wanted to eat all the time, and a few times I was like, okay, you don't have to eat everything. Ah! But, and then you look at him and he just has these dopey little eyes and you're like, oh, poor guy, you're probably just hungry. Okay, have some more grass. And yeah, he was super sweet. I was lucky to have him. And then my fourth horse was, I called him Splash because he was an Overo Splash. Really cool looking. Again, really lanky, tall, a slender dude. Had batteries for days. Like initially, again, I was like a little weary because I'm like, okay, you're goey and you want to sort of speed out. That's the horse I drew after the little guy that was too scared. And I was like, okay, you're also a bit more, I wouldn't say high strung, but like alert horse. It's like, okay, let's see how this goes. But he was fantastic. I think I led almost the entire time I rode him because he was just so happy to be in the front and he really drew the field with him. And he was just trot, 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 canter, 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 super comfortable, no nonsense, business minded. And I actually think he could be a like regular endurance horse. He did so well. We got lost on him. Well, not lost, but we tried to find a way to cross a river that came out of a lake. And we rode back and forth because we thought we could cross, but it was all mud and you sunk in. There was no crossing. So we wasted almost 20K, like almost 10K there and then 10K back to find the other crossing. And I felt so bad for him because he wouldn't let off. He still had the energy and was still happy to go. I was like, yes, you want to go up this mountain? Of course. Yes, you want to go down the slope? Of course. And he was so good. And it just broke my heart that I had wasted 20K on this horse that he didn't need to do out of the goodness of his heart. Ugh. And yeah, that horse was fantastic. And that horse I rode when we went on the never-ending road. There was one section where it was pretty clear that if we had veered off the road, we would have gotten lost in some fields with fences and ditches and whatnot, so we chose to stay on the road, which turned out to be the right choice. But it was really slow going, a lot of downhill gravel, you couldn't really trot or canter lots, it stretched out forever. We were on this darn bloody road for almost, basically the entire day. And it really got to us mentally. It was just exhausted and annoyed and and then when we knew where we were, we knew that we were, I think, 5 kilometers out to the next vet check and horse station. So that was the last bit I rode on him. I just got off and I was like, you know what, from here I can almost see it. It's straight going. It's just down there. It's 5K. You carried me all this way downhill on the rocks and the gravel. And I just hopped off and I sort of did a bow on the ground to him. I was like, good horse, like, you're just amazing. And I'll foot walk into the vet station. That's okay. You did a fantastic job. You deserve it. And yeah, That was Splash. I would have taken him home. He was fantastic. And then my last horse, I called him Rohan because he looked like a horse from the Rohan cavalry from Lord of the Rings, because I love Lord of the Rings. Random fact. And I drew him, and he's a big, tall, solid bay. He looks like he's a thoroughbred Clydesdale cross, like kind of lanky, but also really thick boned and sort of a strong head. And I'm not gonna lie, like there was part of me that had hoped I would have drawn something flashier as my last horse. You know, some people had these beautiful buckskins that looked like little Lusitanos, or some really fancy Pains or Palominos or something, you know, like, ah. And I drew a bay. Nothing wrong with bays. The best horses have no color. We all know how it goes. But yeah, of course, you know, everybody has an ego and everybody has this little stupid voice in their head. So yeah, when I initially drew him, I was like, oh, okay. But again, I felt so lucky. He turned out to be really amazing. Definitely a forward horse, huge canter stride. I think that's the thoroughbred in him. I had about 50% brakes. I felt at any time when we were going fast. I was like, okay, here we go. Better don't do anything stupid. But super sweet. I was most impressed with him when we were going through some really steep up and down canyon stuff where we had to go on foot. I mean, a Gaucho maybe would tell you that you can ride it, but we all felt like it was a safer choice to be on foot. Also because the ground gave. It was really slidey, sand, fine gravel. You had to really look where you placed your feet. And he, again, as I said, was really tall and lanky. And he was really struggling with that. And sometimes when he scrambled up and down, he was just fast because he needed to figure out his long legs. And then because of that, as a result, he sometimes ended up sort of above me on a slope, which is a really bad position to be in, because if they end up above you on the slope, if they slide down on top of you, so that's not great. So leading him up and down some of the slopes was really hard, because where do you even go? And then if he's just all of a sudden, without doing anything wrong, he just tries to, you know, not fall, and then he's above you. So what I did with one slope where we had to go up, and I looked up and the first person had gone up already walking their horse that was sort of a chunkier, stouter mountain horse thing that done really well. And I looked up and I looked at my horse and looked at his long legs, and I thought, this is just not going to work in the normal way. And he was just such a good boy, had been such a good boy the entire time. I thought, you know what? You're smart. You know how to figure out your feet on your own. So I knotted his reins, threw the reins over his neck, knotted them up so they wouldn't fall off. And I was like, hey, can you just wait like a few steps past the sort of where the slope comes out? And she's like, yeah, sure. And I sent him up. I just, you know, tidied up the reins and went behind him, was like, clapped my hands and said, okay, but you go, you can do it. And without batting an eye, he did it perfectly. He scrambled up, went up to the other person, she could grab him, then I scrambled up by myself without having to hold a horse or being worried about him being on top of me. And we'd done that a few times, and he was so good. And he was clearly not a horse that was built for this kind of terrain. But again, that's the draw of luck. That's how the race works, and that's what we all sign up for. And he was fantastic. I was so happy. And he had this really big, comfortable canter. And I actually had two of my favorite canters on him. One of them being across the plains towards the panorama of Mount Fitzroy with a group of lovely people. It was the two Wendy's, Kyla, Emily, and Lori, the people I rode with for the last few days. And it was just such a good vibe. Everyone was just happy to be there. Everyone was just loving their horses. It was a sunny day, and there was the blue iconic mountains in the background, and we were just cantering, galloping across these fields as a unit. It was glorious. That was really wonderful. And I'm just gonna open a window because it's really warm in here. And the second really great experience I had with him with a canter was the last stretch before finish line, like 5K or so out. There was a 1 or 2 kilometer sort of open grassland in between the mountains where you could just canter and let the reins loose and let him go, and it was just so fun. He was so good. It was so amazing. So yeah, as I said, I was really, really, really happy with the horses that I drew. The two I decided to redraw, I think, turned out to be the right decision. But yeah, in that sense, I think I got lucky. Generally on the horses, as I said, the logistics are just bonkers, so that's cool. That it even worked out to begin with. And as I said, would you give your own horse, even for money, to some strangers from a different country that ride most of them in a different style? So that's a big ask, I think. Now into a section that I'm getting into because a lot of people have approached me about it because they heard things from other people and was like, oh, really? That's what it was like? Ooh, this and that. And I would just like to preface this with that this is not to put anyone down, but there were certainly things being said and described and put in a certain light that I see differently. And I think it's good for people who are interested in the race or who are curious about the race to get the full perspective. And that's why I will be saying the things I will be saying. So what other people have approached me about because they heard it from others is that the horses were bad catching. Yes and no. So a lot of horses aren't used to the way we do it here, that you can just walk up to them in a field in a corral and just put the halter on and they stand there. That is true. What often happens is that these horses, they live out on range. They live in the mountains and the pampas grasslands. And then when they are needed to ride as a large group, they get rounded up by one or two riders on horseback, maybe with dogs, and they get driven into a corral. And because they're working estancias, like it's very rare for just one rider to go out in a day. Like usually it's 5, 6, 7 people every day going out, fixing fences, looking after cows, whatever. So you need multiple horses. And then what they do, because they don't want to crisscross the corral individually to get every single horse, what they do is they sort of put them in a corner and then they take one of these long seatbelt like lunge lines things and sort of just tie them to the fence on one end, corner the horses, and then tie the other end so that the horses are in that corner. And a lot of horses that I've seen after the race, actually, they're used to this. They know that this is the procedure. And then they are like, oh, okay, now we're here. And then they turn around. They, by themselves, line up at the sort of cord that is being put across. And then you can just walk up with all the halters because they have all their heads facing your way. You put on all the halters, then you lead them out. That's what a lot of people do. It's a different process. And we were actually told beforehand that, yeah, it's not like it's at home. So what usually works well is if you work as a group, or if you take these long lines or these seatbelt-like ropes and then you sort of corner them, and then one person holds the rope and the other person walks in and catches them. It's a different method, right? And I'm not saying one is worse or better, or that, I agree with everything or want to do everything in a way that I've seen there. But I wouldn't call that bad training. It's just how people do it and how they're used to it and how the horses are used to it. And then that works. And as they say, when in Rome. But yeah, and of course it wasn't always possible for us during the race to do it that way because, people come in at different times. Oh, I actually need that horse over there, or now I'm here, I need that horse. So yeah, it looked a little wild sometimes catching those horses. For sure, it did. No two ways about it. And at one station, actually, Hugh from Australia and Warwick, they were really great helping people with catching horses because they're really experienced horsemen and really experienced stockmen. And then, they caught the ones that were super easy, and then they positioned them so that the other horses had a barrier and then someone else could walk up to them. So, catching horses with horses kind of thing. And that was super cool, and that worked really well as well because at the end of the day, horses are horses, right? So yeah, but the setting is different from what they know at home. They're with different horses, different people, different location. So, even if that's a different way of how they're being caught, they're going to be even more riled up than they usually are just because of what it is, right? Another thing that was said is that the horses are too dangerous for some of the riders who are in the race. Or that they're not used to saddlebags or some essential things that they will be encountering during the race. What I can say is that at one horse station where I was, I actually saw the night before with the vets and the gauchos. They caught out every single horse of the corral. They had a list and put a check mark next to everyone that they got. They saddled it. They put saddlebags on because I think the day before someone had an accident and it was said that, ooh, it's probably because the horse wasn't used to the saddlebag or something. I don't know what exactly happened. I don't know. But that was something that was being said. And the Gaucho's reaction was like, oh, well, they should all know this. And then management said, well, but let's make sure, because we don't want to have this again. And yes, it's, there is inherent danger and risk in it, and that's kind of the appeal of the event, but we just want to make sure that there's none in there that's just gonna have an absolute meltdown in the first second you put a saddlebag on them. And I was there because I had come to that vet station early, and the Gauchos and vet team, they pulled out every single horse, they saddled it, they put saddlebags on it, moved it around, flapped it around a little bit. And yeah, some, scooted to the side or had a slightly bigger reaction than the others. But none of them had a meltdown. They were all, okay, I guess that's there, that kind of thing. So that's what I saw. I think it was a really good call from management to decide to do that, to double check that, to make sure that, there's certain proof in place that the horses can deal with that. So I can't say that, oh, it's just because the horses weren't used to anything that is necessarily true. That was one vet station. That's what I saw. But I do think it showed really good care and precaution on side of the management. And it showed that the horses, by and large, were, able to face what was going to be thrown their way. In terms of, horses generally, or some of them not being safe, there's certainly a broad range of temperaments in the horses that were at those corrals. Some of them, like Big Red, were like, and some of them, like my friend's horse, or the horse that I redrew, were very, thin-skinned and more on the more nervous and alert side, for sure. I wrote stuff down. Let me check what I wrote down. And as I said, the horses I felt were really good, so I can't say too much about horses being too bad or dangerous. And you are always able to redraw, as I said. That's your choice. No one has to go with what they're given, even though that's part of, the game. That's like, ooh, what you gonna get? Are you gonna be able to cope with that? That's part of the challenge, but there's always the option to redraw. You don't have to take any horse. If you say this is dangerous, then you don't have to take it. And to be honest, if management or staff on site see you dealing with a horse and they think you're completely overhorsed and you're going to hurt yourself, they will say something, and they remain, they reserve the right to make people redraw if they feel it's just not a good idea. I never saw that happen, but that mechanism is there for sure. Always able to redraw. And that's the thing. I think for me, I went into the race, and there was part of me that was like, ooh, maybe you could place, maybe you could win, maybe you could, get some honor and glory. But I was also very aware that there's some really accomplished backcountry and horse people in the event, that the horses there are ridden very different and react different to maybe what I'm used to. And my main thing was that I wanted to finish and I wanted to stay safe and not end up in hospital. So for me, even though I was sad that I redrew this one horse that I just couldn't get to calm down enough, and it did ping my ego a little bit, but I didn't go in there with this idea of, ooh, but I can ride any horse. I would like to be that person, but I'm also really aware that I'm not. So in that sense, I think it's a matter of maybe taking your ego out of the equation and just looking at, is this working? Is this not working? And if it's not, then you can redraw. I don't know. Some people did have accidents. There was some broken ribs. There was some broken ankles the year that I participated in 24. But that can happen with your steady Eddie at home. It's just never spooked at that. And then for some reason, boom, and you come off. So of course it's a different setting, but that's also, you're never 100% safe, that's for sure. And the other thing that I mentioned earlier is that, these guys that ride and train these horses are just incredibly gutsy. And the Gaucho culture is very much built on that too. So, the sort of, from the heyday of the olden days, the bravado and the skill and the toughness and the fearlessness, that's still very real. That's still something they really pride themselves off and that they have. Like, the people that I've seen there during and after the race, the Gauchos riding at the estancias, They don't ride like someone who's trained through Pony Club, even if you're an amazing equestrian. It's not the same thing. And a lot of them, too, there are current or ex rodeo cowboys, when they hop on something that like stomps and chomps on the bit and sort of prancing around, but it's not actively trying to buck you off. They're like, yeah, it's a good, calm horse. What do you mean? So perceptions are very different. Of course, based on what they do with the horses, the training is very different, how they grow up, what they're used to, the terrain, the speed, the energy of the horse. So I think that's an important perspective to bear in mind, both for the riders themselves, but also for, the people organizing the event. Like, they are not just getting some horses together, they're getting horses together from a different culture, from people with different opinions and approaches to training and animal husbandry and what the horse should or shouldn't do. And yeah, it's just not gonna be like at home, but that's the whole point of going there, is that it's not gonna be like at home. That's part of the challenge and part of what the event is. Da, 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 da. Yes, and yeah, as I said, those they're comparable to cowboys that work and they participate in rodeos and they get bucked off the youngsters and they start colts and they round up mustangs. Like, that's the kind of riding they do. So the definition of a calm horse for them may differ from a definition of a calm horse for someone, even someone who competes, but pleasurably, not professionally in the Western world or whatever you want to call it, quote unquote. Another thing that was noted was that they're bad at mounting. Yeah, you got to be fast. Fast but not hectic, for sure. And as I said, it's difficult with all the gear and your saddlebags and your heavier shoes and what have you. It's a challenge. And usually what I found is that the first mount at the horse station is usually the trickiest, because the energy is charged, the horses are charged, they don't know you yet, you don't know them yet. And that's where I saw most things go wrong, if they went wrong for people. And then after, once they're working and once they have a job and once they feel like you're not going to give them too much trouble and they don't have to be scared of you, then they settle right in. But yeah, they're used to, get up and go. They're not used to standing still, fixing your things, blah, 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 this and that. It's just not what they do. And what I found too, and a lot of people will disagree, but with a nervous horse or with a horse that's antsy at least to go, if you don't know that horse particularly very well, you can make it worse by wanting them to stand still and not move their feet, because if they're antsy and anxious, them moving their feet is their safety mechanism, their flight animal. If you take that away from him or you try to force them into a sort of freeze position, that's when they explode. That's just my personal experience. People may disagree, but yeah, that's my comment on that part. And the other thing too, again, my opinion, my experience is that we're not there to entirely retrain a horse that has years of experience and training from a different approach, method, worldview, whatever. The whole point is that you get a feel for your horse as soon as possible, and then both with what the horse brings and what you bring to kind of make it work and collaborate and get through this together and become a team. Yeah, you're not going to retrain a horse within 2 days, I think. And you may, you may not agree with certain things. You may say, well, I would love my own personal horse to this and this and that, or I would not accept this in a horse that I train at home. And this may be, I think, a good approach if you actually have a horse for longer and the desired outcome is for you to retrain the horse and then the horse to continue on that trajectory with this new training, then that's all cool. But if you have a horse from a certain background for 2 days and then it's going to go back to that same background and environment, what's the point in fitting a round peg into a square hole? That's my personal opinion on it. And I found, for me, again, with the lucky and pretty amicable horses that I drew, that worked really well. If, they were stiff to one side, weren't good at turning one side rather than to that side, yeah, on a long-term basis, that would maybe be something you want to retrain. But you're not going to fix it within 2 days. You just know, okay, he turns better this way than that way. So when I'm in the mountains or I need to cross, I'm going to position him that way so that I can have him where he reacts well. That's how I see it. But that's probably also why I'm not a professional trainer. Yeah, another thing that was mentioned that someone asked me about was what condition or training state or health state the horses were in, because they had heard that some horses may have been not sufficiently trained or sick or just not an overall good nick. So from my experience, and I say this, of course, I haven't seen every single horse in the race, but I've seen a fair chunk of the horses that were used. And my impression was that none of them I saw looked bad, as in like, scrawny or like terrible, ribs coming out or terrible coat or any of that. In my opinion, they all looked healthy, like in general, good condition. Could they have been more muscled up or with bigger hindquarters or whatever? Probably. Like, I didn't go and scan every single horse. And also, as I said, they come from different places. They get transported over long different distances. They get put with horses that aren't from their original herd. So is it possible that maybe some of them caught a virus or something that then affected them? Sure, it's possible. I personally didn't see that. I can't rule it out. But yeah, I didn't encounter that myself. In terms of, what was mentioned, condition, training, endurance. So here's what I saw during my time in South America that was more than the race, both before and after the event. So a total of roughly 3 months, a little over 3 months. These horses live out on range in the hills with predators. They get rounded up fairly regularly at speed. They often get driven to other pastures or here and there, or they just run because there's other riders or there's predators or whatnot over pretty crazy terrain with high elevation gains up and down. One cattle drive or animal drive that I participated in after that was pretty cool. I thought I was going to die at a few times, but then it was fine. We rounded up a bunch of horses and they were supposed to go over 100 kilometers. So that was a multi-day thing. And we rounded them up, and in one day we drove them 40 kilometers, technically down the road. But if you know horses and you drive them at speed, they're not going to go down the road. They're going to go up the hill, down the hill, into the canyon, out of the river, it's hard. They don't always do what you want them to do because they're big, spunky animals. And yeah, we did 40 kilometers in a day, but it was less than a full day. It was maybe, and we took rests, as you're supposed to do during the Derby as well. You take rests for them to drink, to nibble a little bit, to calm down a little bit. But for a lot of that track, they went at speed. And yes, were they sweaty sometimes? Sure. But they were fine. They did those 40K sometimes at ridiculous speed over terrain, and it didn't really seem to faze them. I didn't see, again, this is not the Derby, but somewhere else, but it's Patagonia. I didn't see a single lame horse. I didn't see a single puffy tendon. I didn't see any horse, struggling metabolically or anything. And this is not to say that I know the exact training regimen that the people in estancias and gauchos from each horse station have used to prepare the horses for the Derby. I don't. But just the reality of how horses live down there is very different from the Western world. And I feel that a lot of horses down there have a much better baseline fitness and endurance than any of our horses here, which is not the same as being ridden up and down the mountains for 2 days, but they get used on the estancias and they get ridden to the fens and here and there. And it's not what you think, like a cowboy bumbles around on his horse all day and, smokes a cigarette and stands on the side. There is a lot of work at speed because these estancias in Patagonia are huge. He's not going to walk his horse 2 hours across to fix the fence. He's going to canter and gallop there over anything. And that's what they're used to. And yes, it's still not the same as an endurance event. It's still not the same as the Gaucho Derby. But as I said, each horse is in the Derby for 2 days. Given their lifestyle and given the work a lot of these horses do, I think, by and large, they are fit to do the job. I think that back home, when I say home, I mean North America, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, we are so specialized in our field of just horses, or then even the disciplines that we're dealing with, being endurance, reining, horsemanship, whatever. And we've become such specialists and experts in that one thing that it's very easy to get tunnel vision and then to discount everything that falls outside of this frame. And with an event like the Gaucho Derby, that is marketed as, ooh, go to this remote, wild, unknown area in the world of a different culture and explore and experience. Yeah, it's not gonna be textbook what you want to see back home, because it is a different background and it is a different culture and it is a different lived reality with different infrastructure and often very limited resources. Not just even financially, but just to get certain things in certain places isn't possible. Another thing too is I think the Patagonian horses are incredibly tough. Which is not to say that, you know, it means that you shouldn't look after them, but they are incredibly tough because of how they live and also how they're bred. Because anything that doesn't make it out there because it has super bad feet or it has tendon issues or it's just not very smart, either gets eaten by the cougars or is gonna be fed to the dogs because it's just no good as a workhorse. And that's very different from what we deal with, where we diagnose and medicate and put animals through therapy and this treatment and that treatment and yada yada yada. So we basically make things work that in nature wouldn't be workable and would elect themselves out of the DNA, out of the gene pool, you know. And I think that's why we are so used to a certain level of perfectionism, because we have to compensate for a lot of weaknesses that simply don't come up in areas that are a little tougher in terms of environment. Again, that's just my opinion. Is that everything from here? Yes, that was everything from here. How did you do? Well, you maybe have noticed earlier when I talked about the horses, I said everybody gets 7 horses. I only described 5 horses. Well, there is a reason. My friends Heidi and John and we got stuck in an area that Heidi very poignantly called Satan's Arboretum, so Satan's forest. It was just, we got into this forested area that we're, according to the route, we're supposed to go. But it wasn't just a forest. It was a forest that was crisscrossed with fences and ditches and bogs and big logs that were down where you couldn't cross. And that was a part where, again, it was a little maybe down to luck, because we didn't want to mess with the fences, because you can get into trouble if you end up on someone's property where you're not supposed to be, and then it's a problem for the entire event, because then landowners get cranky and why is this person there? They're not supposed to be there. So we wanted to be really, really certain and respectful of that. So we didn't mess with any fences. We didn't even go over any down fences, because all 3 of us had brain farts and forgot that during the meeting it was said that if a fence is actually down on the ground and you find it like just lying there, you can walk over it. And we found 1 or 2 sections where it was down, but we also weren't sure, you know, is it supposed to be down? Do they know it's down? Maybe it just got blown over or a cow pushed it over, but it's actually supposed to be up. And now if we go over, then we are on someone's property. So we were freaking out about that a little bit. So we just got terribly lost in there, super slow. It took us like a half day in the afternoon and then the next following morning to get out of there, to finally find the gate where we can get ourselves out of this labyrinth. So we lost a lot of time there. And then what happened is at the, not the next station, but the next one after that, when we arrived at the end of the day, at the longest, after the longest driveway in the history of driveways, I think it was 20 kilometers. It just didn't end. And we finally got to the horse station and the vet check and where we would stay the night. And they said, okay, guys, you know, well done for getting here. Good job. Here's the thing. You're at vet station 9. And tomorrow you would have to make it to vet station 14 if you don't want to have to be carried forward in a truck. And the second you get carried forward in a truck to make the cutoff time for vet station 14, you jump into what's called the adventure class. So you can still ride, you can still be in the field, but you're no longer competing for any placings. You're just going to finish the race so you can finish the race. And that's likely to happen no matter what you choose. Here are your 2 choices. Tomorrow morning, you're at vet station 9. We drive you all the way to vet station 14. And then after that, the next day, you continue riding in the adventure class. Or you start here tomorrow morning, you draw a new horse, you ride out into what's called the Plateau of Death, it is what it sounds like. It's a really high mountain pass with rock bogs where it looks like it's solid ground, but you sink into the bog. There's very limited satellite coverage. Um, if the medic needs to get to you, it's going to take some time just because of the terrain. Um, and you're still probably not going to make it in time to vet station 14. So you can ride the Plateau of Death, but then after the next check, we would probably have to pick you up in a truck and drive you to vet station 14 after that, from 12 to 14 or whatever it is. And we had just come out of this terrible forest with all the fences and the never-ending driveway, and we looked at each other and we were so torn, because on the one hand, you don't come so far to then just go, whatever, I just not ride a huge chunk of the race. But at the same time, we were just mentally exhausted, a little frustrated that we hadn't made better way. And also from the description, of the terrain that was ahead of the Plateau of Death, with us still probably ending up in the adventure category. So we weren't even competing for anything anymore, even if we decided to ride that section. Talked some back and forth, and I talked with Heidi and John, and Lori and Wendy were in there too. And then we decided that, yes, we were tired, but also if we weren't even competing anymore anyways, we didn't feel like putting a horse through that, even though they were perfectly capable, but we didn't want to, drag a horse through that if it wasn't even for reaching something, which sounds really selfish because it probably is, because the horse doesn't make that call either way. But we felt like it just wasn't meant to be at that point. So we didn't actually ride the Plateau of Death. Once you accept the carry forward, you are in the adventure category. I was really bummed, not because I at that point thought I was going to win anything big, but I felt physically really good. Like, my knee that I was worried about didn't give me any trouble. My back was fine. I felt relatively strong, and, nothing hurt. Nothing gave me trouble where I felt like, oh, this is going to be a problem. So I was just bummed that I didn't push myself physically as hard as I could have, and that I just simply didn't get to do the thing in its entirety. And I was bummed about the logistics, because basically there's cutoff times for some of the stations so that, the circus can travel on. Because as I said, it's a huge logistical, probably nightmare that they have to deal with. And there's just certain cutoff times. I tried to calculate it out and suss it out in my head. And I felt like, yeah, but we have 10 days. I could still make it in 10 days. I would just lag behind. But then, of course, you need to cover those lagging people medically with emergency and evac services, with emergency services being on standby. Then that drags out the entire, staff team, and it just doesn't work. And I get that. I was personally frustrated, but I get that. And that's what happened. So we ended up being in the adventure category. We were bumped forward to VetCheck 14 from originally 9. Didn't do the Plateau of Death. And so basically we spent one day in a car or van just driving. But to be honest, I was frustrated, but also I think it did restore my energies, because I had one day of break and riding, and then the next day was still hard. But I felt like if I had done the Plateau of Death and still been in the adventure category regardless, and then had the following tough day, that maybe would have just done me in. I don't know. So ultimately, even though it was frustrating, I think it was the right call. Where are we? Yeah, even though it was frustrating. So what were your most frustrating moments was one of the questions. Gear malfunction. Oh my Lord. I feel like I can deal with a lot of things, from horses and people, but if the gear, the unanimated material thing that I spend money on that is supposed to work doesn't work for some reason, it just drives me really, really mad. And actually at the first night where we stayed at a vet check, my jet boil, for some reason, sorry jet boil, later it worked out fine. It was just at this one point testing, my mental fortitude. It just wouldn't start. And I got so annoyed. I was like, why isn't this working? I used it at home like 10 million times. Like, why is it not firing up? It's got a full gas canister. Everything's looking okay. Nothing's bent. Nothing's broken. It just wouldn't fire up. And you're tired. You're getting cold because the sun's going down. Now once you're off your horse, you realize how hungry you are. It was just, And I sort of kept talking at it, and people around me noticed. I was like, why aren't you working? This is so stupid. Like, you just, like this. And people start looking at you like, oh my God. And then I managed to fire it up. I was like, oh, finally, okay, geez. And I turn around to get my camp food, and I turn back around to my jet boil, and it had fallen over, and like a piece of cow dung was starting to catch fire right next to the sheep shed. And I was like, great, I'm burning down camp now too. I stomped it out. Luckily, nothing actually caught fire. Oh god! And then thanks again so much to Imo and Izzy. They helped me out with their like jet boil. They put that on my gas canister and helped me with the lighter and everything, and then we got it fired up. So thank you again. Sorry if I scared you. I was probably really grumpy, but as I said, for some reason, that's the thing that really sets me off. Is just when something material that has a purpose that I bought for that specific purpose, for usually, you know, especially with an event like this, you spend a pretty penny on it and then it doesn't work. It just gets me. Um, mm, 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 mm. One station in the morning, I couldn't find my hobbles, and I was so damn sure I had left them on the horse. I had put them on pretty well. All of a sudden, all the horses in the morning were somewhere else. None of them were wearing hobbles. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sure like the Gauchos, because they wanted to drive them or put them in a different car, they took the hobbles off. And I was like, no, they didn't take the hobbles. They were just off in the morning. I crisscrossed the entire field, couldn't find my hobbles. Not just did I then not have hobbles, I also didn't have the holy shit handle, you know, for those moments or those horses where you're like, So that made me really antsy and also nervous, because I was like, well, what if I don't have my handle? I mean, yes, I should be a good enough rider to not need it, but I want it. And I lost time because I looked for them. I was worried about not having it. I was worried about then not having it when I had to leave a horse somewhere at night and I couldn't hobble them, couldn't secure them. They might run away. I asked the team if they had extra hobbles. They said, no, sorry, we don't have any spares here. Maybe at the next station. I was like, great. And just as I was about to ride off with Heidi and John, I see this Gaucho walking along in the corral with a pair of hobbles in his hand. No idea if those were mine, but I'm like, hey, are those hobbles you found in the grass? And he said, oh, yeah, are they yours? And I just went with it. It's like, yeah, that, of course, I can totally see that they are mine, even though they look exactly like everyone else's hobbles. So I had my little saddle strap back, so I was like, whew. But yeah, in that moment, I was frustrated because it didn't have the thing that I needed. And I think it's a very good example for how you get stuck in your own head, because in my head I thought, but I need those. I cannot, like, I could have gone without those. Somehow we would have figured it out. But in my head it was just, you know, game over. So much for getting stuck on things. Satan's Arboretum, the forest with all the fences, that was incredibly frustrating, as I mentioned. And the little scared horse at the station that I redrew, that I, you know, passed on, that I couldn't make to feel safe. That was frustrating for me personally, because I wish I would have been someone who could have done this, but it was just not the right call. And then on the last night, almost when we were almost there, my tent pole broke, again, from a fairly new tent that was just a week or so into use, that was a decent brand, and it just snapped in a way and in a place that no matter how much tape or paracord or how I cinched it up and tied it, it just didn't hold the tension anymore the way you needed it to. So the entire tent was sort of like drooping down on top of me now. And the forecast was calling for rain, and we were on this weird sandy slope where there weren't any trees, so I couldn't, you know, string it up to anything either. And I was in there, I thought, great, if it rains tonight, I'm just going to be sopping wet the next morning in my down, non-synthetic sleeping bag. Wonderful. So I was grumpy about that for sure. And sorry to, you know, the other riders who were with me. I was like, ugh. But yeah, that's what it was. What were some of the best moments? As I said, the last horse, when he sort of went up the hill by himself and was super good, that was just, oh, my heart, what a guy. It was really, all the best moments, I think, were the horses and just how they were willing to work with and for people that they barely knew, in super tough terrain with other horses that weren't part of their herd. Yeah, just in awe. Just in awe. And also the team, the Derby team, the management and coordinators, I thought were all lovely, but also really the local crew. So the Gauchos, the Argentinian vet ladies, the estancia owners, you know, the horse breeders who at so many stations, they came and they cooked us some food or they gave us some extra snacks, which wasn't technically the plan. So we had planned to, bring all of our freeze-dried meals and be ready and be hungry and just deal with it. And they just took care of us. It's like, oh, here, have some extra. We made some dessert. Oh, do you want some cookies? Oh, here's some. It's just so nice and hospitable and friendly and respectful, and welcoming, which is why I'll get into this in a little bit, why some of the comments I heard from some riders really got to me on behalf of local people, which is maybe a bit of white savior complex. I don't know, but I was surprised to hear some of the things that I heard. Only a few. It was not through the ranks, but yeah, I thought people there were really great. Incredible skill, incredible culture, incredible warmth. That was my experience. And someone asked about communications and organizations, because some people had said that there was stuff going wrong, that it was a little not clear what was happening, that there was a lag in communications. Again, I can only speak to what I've experienced and seen. So again, kudos to Eric Cooper, Stevie Delahunt, and Holly, who are working locally with the horse people and estancia owners and vet team and gauchos, because it's, as I said, intercultural communication. So it's not just, you have to work with the local culture. You can't just come there especially as gringos or gringas. There is historical context. If you just come there, throw some money at people and be like, here, do this, 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 and this because I say so, and that might not go down so well, and it might not get you the results you want. And maybe the results you want sometimes involve some compromise or doing it not the way you had intended, but the local way. So I think it's important to be aware of that and what people who organize these events are actually dealing with. And again, I think they did a great job to even pull this off in the first place, to gain the trust of landowners and horse owners to agree to this, because yes, it's for money, but still it's a huge ask. If you ever dealt with rural communities and farmers and ranchers and you're like, hey, so can we ride over your land with like 40 people and a ton of horses and trucks and things? See how that goes. You might have some tough conversations ahead of you for sure. Yeah, just checking my notes to make sure I answer everything correctly. The route, en route regarding communications. Yeah, so we were, as I said, we discussed the entire route with the vet checks, the waypoints, the route markers, the horse stations beforehand. They discussed how the equipment works. They discussed how communication channels work, how you can use your phone to hook it up to your InReach, and also how you have to charge it. So I think what happened, I'm not sure this was the case in all of the situations that were mentioned, but we got a power bank specifically for the InReach, that little thing that tracks you and where you can send emergency messages. It hooks up to your phone and other devices. I'm not sure, but I feel like some people's power banks ran out pretty fast. I don't know if they used it to charge other stuff. Maybe the power bank was faulty. I wasn't there. I have no idea. But it was supposed to be just for that thing, and mine lasted me well. Maybe some of them were faulty. I don't know, but my equipment worked. The other thing that is really important to bear in mind, and this was discussed with us, and we were made aware of this beforehand during the pre-race briefing and training, is that it's not like a landline or sending messages on your phone when you're using the InReach, even though you're using your phone that is hooked up to your InReach to type the message, because it's easier than, like on an old brick Nokia to sort of select the letters. So you write it on your phone, but it goes through your InReach, and it's using satellites in a very sparsely covered area, in a very remote backcountry area. So for a message to go out one way can be 15 to 20 minutes until it reaches the other side, which means that even if someone replies to your message within 5 minutes of reading it, because maybe they have to look something up that you're asking, or they have 5 other messages before yours, it can still take up to 45 or so minutes until you see the reply on your InReach after you sent it out. Again, I wasn't there during some of the scenarios that were described, but it was commented on and criticized that, the communication was too slow and people didn't react. I don't know, but I feel like part of this was potentially because the signal takes a long time. It's not like a text message on your phone. And it can take, in the best case scenario, it can take up to 45 minutes until you see a reply to your message. So that's just something to bear in mind. And that is, as I said, something we were made aware of during race training. Would you do it again? Wow. With a horse that I'm happy and comfortable with. And but as I said, they all turned out good, the ones that I did end up riding. And without the terrible forest, we can definitely do without the forest. I would totally go back and do it again. I actually would love to go back to Patagonia a little longer before the race and just work with and train or, get to know like maybe 2 or so horses and then do it with them when I know and really like them already and just be relaxed and enjoy the scenery and not deal with the forest. Did I say I didn't want the forest? So I think that's something I have in mind. I know that's not how the format works, so it's probably not possible. If I were a medic on the medical team, I think it would be great to just hang back and just sweep the field from behind, because that's what some of them did. So they got to ride too, because even, the communications or organization or medical team, they're all horse people. So they all can ride and they all got to ride, I think, at least some sections of the route, which is great. And I think that would be a fun thing. So yeah, if someone came in and paid the whole thing for me today, I would do it again, just because it's so, it's, I think, indescribable, the places that we got to go. And it doesn't really translate, no matter how you describe it, how many pictures and videos you take, you have to experience it. And it's just, I just have such gratitude for having been there, not just because it's beautiful, but thinking of how few people, if any, in the world get to go to these specific places that we got to, let alone on horseback. So that's pretty epic. And I just still think it was such a good thing in my life that I did it. And yeah, closing notes. As I said, I'm grateful. I know it's a privilege. It's a super unique experience. I'm so grateful for the horses and what they did for us. As I said, I was a little confused and hurt on behalf of other people by some of the remarks that some riders made, especially about horses and stuff and like local culture. And I'm not going to name names, but, some people, they weren't so happy with the speed that their horse was moving with or the type of horse that they drew for a certain leg of the race. And it's like, oh, they're all the same. They're so bloody lame. They're so bloody slow. You just have to, blah, blah, blah. And oh yeah, I didn't have a good day. I just drew a shit horse. And I'm like, I'm sorry. He just carried your bacon for like 50 kilometers. Like, show some gratitude. I know it didn't go the way you wanted it to, but that's part of the game, right? You don't know what you're getting. And some horses are naturally faster than others. Even with the training, they're not going to be all the same. I heard, people, because they got frustrated with certain things, call staff incompetent. I heard people say that, oh, they just don't know how to train their bloody horses. That's why they're so bad at catching, yada, yada, yada. And I understand the frustration. And a lady that was in the race, Wendy Ferguson, who I very much appreciate, said something really good, saying that don't judge someone in the middle of their journey as opposed to the end, because we were all in an extreme situation. We were all, hungry, tired, maybe not doing the way we wanted to be doing, frustrated, potentially hurt, from being bucked off or kicked or whatever that happened. And also what no one has mentioned, which I'm confused about, there were some people who themselves, they either were struggling a little bit with the grumbly tummies, or they had caught, the flu. Some people actually were sneezing and coughing pretty severely for some part of the race, and that affects you. And that doesn't just affect you in terms of, physical strength and endurance. It affects you mentally. Like, you're just grumpy. You're not in a good mood. So, I want to allow space for that too, and understand that people were in an extreme situation, and we do not always react in the best ways or, say the most perfect things in extreme situations. But as I said, I just want to relativize maybe some of the stuff that was put out there and just give my perspective, and that is my perspective, is that I felt some things that were said, or how horses, staff, and locals were described, wasn't super respectful, and I think that's a shame, because in that moment, yeah, it colored the way I saw certain things for sure, and I just sometimes, yeah, I was, I didn't say anything. I don't mean to aggravate anyone, but yeah, for me personally, I kind of inwardly shook my head a little bit. But yeah, as I said, that's my perspective. Um, and as I said, it's an expensive event. Like all the money, as I just described, goes into a lot of things, like licenses, permits, insurance. Can you imagine the insurance costs on this thing? They have a helicopter on standby, they have a medical team, they have all of this preparation. Like, they work on this not just while they're there. There's months and months, and you have to pay these people's wages. So if you factor all of this in, you can see where the 16K US come from, and they probably about break even. I haven't seen any numbers, but given all of this, I don't think that this is a huge, profit by any means. But never again, at 16K a pop, it's an event for people who are in a wage bracket or in a position to pay for this. And there was one rider, Henry, from Chile, and he was the only person from the whole of South America who participated. And I think that tells you something as well, So, and also, to be aware that Argentina's average or living wage is maybe a third or a fourth of that of the US. But if you go to El Calafate, or also over in Chile, like grocery prices are almost on par with the US. Like, it's different. It's not the same. And then to go in and expect things to be just like at home, and infrastructure and products and whatnot to be just like at home, I think is a little short-sighted, just given the reality. And Argentina, Patagonia as a whole, but especially also Argentina, of course, has a really long-standing, very passionate, very proud horse culture, and generations and generations of experience and things that were passed on. And I mean, you have the same thing, in the US or Europe. Like, you ask 5 people, you get 10 opinions. So there's variation in all of this too. It's not like, oh, this is the Patagonian way, oh, this is the European way. Of course, there are tendencies, but it's still down to the person. So I also wouldn't go as far as to say, oh, every single horse in the Derby was like this, or every single horse in the Derby was bad to catch, or they are all like this and that. There's nuance, right? And I think it's important to see that, and it's important to also have the respect and appreciation that just because something doesn't work for me doesn't mean it's not working. Just because I disagree with something and say, oh, I wouldn't do it like this with my own horse, which is fine, doesn't mean that the person in question is garbage at working with horses or what they want to do with horses, right? So I think that's something important to bear in mind. And as I mentioned earlier, like, it's just the gutsiness of it all in the Gaucho culture that I just, even if, I don't agree with every single method or every single thing that's done, but you just have to really appreciate these guys and what they're able and willing to physically do. And it's just bravery, fearlessness, physical skill. And I sometimes do wonder, in our Western, quote unquote, or European or North American world, like, we solve a lot of things with a lot of training, which is great. And I count myself into that group. So don't get me wrong, I count myself into this group. But we solve a lot of things, or approach a lot of things with training, because maybe we're both unwilling and incapable to cough up the level of bravery that other cultures exhibit. And I know I'm going to be shot down, and, like, some people are really going to hate this, but yeah, if you're an ex-rodeo cowboy that grew up on horses bronking through the pampas, you're gonna be willing to accept different things than someone who rides 2 or 3 times a week on their horse in the arena. It's just not going to be the same thing. So you have to approach things differently. But again, when you go to a different country to explore and experience a different culture, then yes, be prepared for things to be different. That's, as I said earlier, that's the whole point. Yeah, as I said, because who who does it cater to, right? Your training. Like your training is, yeah, should be adapted to the horse you're dealing with, but it also is always adapted to the person who's using it. And then I think that's a good position to maybe look at yourself. Well, what do I want to do? And also, who am I? What am I willing to physically and mentally do? And how am I willing to physically and mentally get challenged or not challenged? And then how does that inform my approach and training? And there's a very nice philosophical, I don't know who said it originally, but there's a philosophical statement that says you cannot look at the lens you're looking through, which means everyone is biased. Everyone has their own background, experience, hang-ups, maybe difficult situations they had, how they handled it, that shapes how they approach horses and training, their worldview in general. And that's not even something that is just you. That's the society and the environment you're in. That's all the generations and layers and years and centuries of horse culture that came before you, that you have picked up by osmosis usually, and that you're not always aware of. In your head, it's, oh, that's just how it's done. Oh, this is the right way to do it. And now, of course, we have, more neuroscientific approaches where stuff is researched, like, nervous system responses and all of that stuff that also comes in. But we are putting it on top of our own bias. And I'm not saying bias as in something bad. It's just how you approach things that is shaped by where and who you are. And if someone's in a different location and is a different person, then it's just natural that they're going to approach things in a different way. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind and respect that. And that's something that I didn't always feel was the case. And that is something that really startled me because, again, because of the segment that this race caters to in terms of riders, like who is coming there, who can, train and pay for this and carve out time and money in their life to prepare for this event. It's not everyone in the world, clearly. So pretty much anyone who was in the race was, no stranger to extensive international travel, higher education, further learning, literature, international contacts, all of this. So it astounded me even more that some people seemed to, and there was like, oh, but it's not like XYZ, so it's garbage. That I found confusing, and that's something that I just see differently. And again, this doesn't mean that, oh, everything is wonderful and amazing Patagonia and everyone now needs to ride and train like this, but to just appreciate it for what it is and to let two things be true and stand and solid at the same time, and not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, yeah, maybe, there's some training or handling methods that I wouldn't do with my horse, but I can still appreciate the skill that goes into this, and I can still appreciate you as a person, and I can still speak respectfully to and about you. Just saying. Yes. Yeah, so with some of the negative comments, as I said, everyone's in an extreme situation. They have different stresses on them in the situation. Maybe something gets said, off the cuff that wasn't intended this way. But also in some of the reviews that were put on the internet purposefully, publicly, there were some things being said and described, maybe for dramatic effect, maybe because people know it appeals to their audience. Quite possible, I'm not discounting that, and I'm also not judging that as, of course, people are always talking to an audience when they do these things. They're not just talking to their friend being, oh, this is what happened. They want to create a certain effect, and this is human. We all do it. When we describe a certain thing in a certain way to someone, it's because we want them to agree with us and have a certain reaction. Nevertheless, I felt that some of the grievances that people brought up and the way they brought them up in was due to the fact that they thought of themselves fairly highly as far as their horsemanship, riding skill, and experience goes. And then maybe they didn't do as well in the race as they had hoped or anticipated. And then there needed to be an external reason for it, because either it was a bad horse or it was an incompetent, event or estancia manager, or it was just bad horse training in this culture, or whatever it was. But it couldn't have been, God forbid, that maybe, other people are doing well as well, and maybe you have some shortcomings in your riding, Or maybe it's just good old bad or good dumb luck. Because as I said, like numerous times, that is part of the deal. Is yes, there's your riding, yes, there's your skill, but there are so many other things that have nothing to do with just your riding skill or your being a trainer that can go wrong. That sometimes it be like that, and take it on the chin, take it with a smile, be a good sport, move along. And I think the three guys, or the one guy and the two gals, the triple threat that ended up winning, they're just such a good example of exactly that, because they're all riders, but not necessarily equestrians. I know Holly from the UK has a fairly extensive riding background. Randall from Germany, yay German, and Daniel from the Netherlands. They fall. Hang on, I wrote this down, and I want to use exactly that verbiage. Blah 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 blah. Where did I put it? I thought it was so good. Yes, they have ridden. I wouldn't call them equestrians. They both don't call themselves equestrians. Like, they've ridden before and they've trained, but they're not like, oh, I show jumped and competed in reining and started calls. Like, that's not their background. But they fall into the super fit, fearless, overall badass category. That's what I wrote down, and I think that's a really good description. And they're just, such good sports. They teamed up together because while they were riding, it just sort of worked out this way. And they're like, hey, we're working really well together and we're in the same spot. And if you listen to some of the podcasts, Daniel explains it, how exactly it happened. And they just complemented each other with their skill, experience, personality. And I think they were just so good about taking things on the chin, and they got bucked off. Daniel was actually in the race in 22 and got kicked in the head and had to be flown out by helicopter to the hospital, so he couldn't even finish the race. And now he was back doing it again. Randall got bucked off, I think. And that's the other thing, because earlier in this super long video, I talked about fitness. And I think part of the reason why they did so well in this environment, even if they're not the most experienced riders, is because they're just so fit and physically capable and so used to putting themselves into really challenging, physically uncomfortable situations that getting bucked off a horse is nothing. Like, they just, brush it off, whatever, get back on. And I'm someone who has ridden for a large part of my life, and I'm not quite like that. Like, when I get bucked off, yeah, I get back on, but it kind of shakes me a little bit because I'm not used to it. Because I'm not, a crazy backcountry mountain climber, mountain biking, motocross, whatever it is they're all doing. They're doing all of the things. So I'm not as used to getting bumped around all the time. And again, for your training, this might be a good thing. I know that actually... Jesse Dowling, who's in the Mongol Derby, who was in the Mongol Derby last year and who's going to do the Gaucho Derby next year, she actually went with a trainer who does fall clinics. So they teach you how to fall, how to roll, how to tumble, how to, turtle around so you don't get hurt. And I think that's a great thing, because there's a high chance that that's going to happen during the race. And if you're comfortable with that, ironically, you're probably less likely to get tossed off because you're just not so worried about it. And then you're just more relaxed and braver, and that might just help you. So yeah, the three who won, Daniel, Randall, and Holly, just such good sports, so friendly. And then same, the runner-ups, so close by a margin, and actually just on a technicality, Olivier and Nate, who also were just such good sports, so positive, so helpful too. Like, whenever they were at camp and someone needed something, they were like, oh, here, do you want this? I have this. Oh, you want some? Oh, I actually have some Imodium. Does his tummy feel back? Actually, Olivier gave me some Imodium because I had the grumbly tummies one day. So thank you so much. So really great sports, really cool people. And funnily enough, because speaking of, being in a frustrating or extreme situation and maybe not making the right judgment calls, Olivier, you're it. At pre-race camp, we were talking about rules and talking about vet checks and about penalties and what happens here and what happens if that happens. And we were all kind of, we'd gone through like 3 meetings already, and we were waiting for lunch, and we were all a bit, Okay. And Olivier kept asking questions, and Olivier kept going, yeah, but that doesn't make sense, because if that rule is like this, then what if this applies? And that isn't fair to the other risers, and shouldn't it be like this? You know, he was like that guy in class, and I remember like rolling my eyes and being like, oh my god, this is like, is he gonna be that person who's gonna, try and cause trouble and be difficult and this and that? But later when I got to know him more, he's just someone who wants to be really thorough and really understand things and really have everything be really clear and fair and square. And that is such a good quality. And then, I ended up really liking him and thinking he was a really great guy, because he is. But yeah, that was a fun one also for me, to be like, hey, maybe you were a little judgmental there. Maybe, take it easy a little bit. And yeah, as I said, all around great people. And by and large, I feel like it's just such the Gaucho Derby as an event, as the whole experience, is just really giving you the question, what kind of experience do you want to have? Do you want to metaphorically and literally die on that hill, get mentally stuck on something and be like, this is how it is, and this is how it's wrong, and this is how it's right? Or do you just want to enjoy the view while you're there for what it is, and then move along and enjoy the next view? And that is a choice. And that is something I think that often we don't think is a choice, because we just, we think without being aware that we think, and judge without being aware that we judge, and that it's our lens we're looking through and not necessarily the world. And for me, anyways, personally, that whole event was a good exercise in that, and just taking a step back and looking at your lens and looking at your reaction and your mental process, and be like, I have a decision to make here, and my decision will determine the outcome for me. And I wouldn't have wanted to miss the experience, because it was a great experience for me. It was great to meet people. I met some really open-hearted, wonderful people on the team, on the rider crew, during preparation, after. It kickstarted a lot of things in my life for me, and that are still going, that I'm really excited about. So for me, it was a great thing to do. And even if, I was in the adventure category and I didn't win, I didn't place, but I got to ride horses every day, all day, through phenomenal landscapes. So 8-year-old me was completely happy, and I think that counts for a lot. And as the race director said before the event during race camp, you don't get the race you want, you get the race you need, whatever that says. And I think it tells you more about you than about anything going on externally, and what you decide to do with it, because it's totally up to you. And along the same lines as, you don't see the world the way it is, you see the world the way you are. So everything's feedback, everything's information. Take what you want, leave what you don't want, move along. That's my opinion anyways. And now I have a list of people I want to thank, and so sorry, I'm going to read this off. Big thanks to both Heidis, John, Stevie, Eric, Holly, the communications and medics team on the Gaucho Derby, both Wendy's, Emily, Lori, Kayla, Kansas, the teams of the estancias, of course, at the vet shacks and horse stations, all of the gauchos who rode and helped and held horses and sang and danced at numerous asados, the local vet team, of course, and the places I got to stay and ride before and after the Derby that aren't directly connected, but it was part of my experience because I was preparing and then in the area. So Fernando and Sabine, the teams at Cerro Frias, La Peninsula, Las Baguales, and of course everyone I may have forgotten. Sorry, I love you. And to everyone out there, be grateful for your horses, enjoy them, and give grace to everything that comes your way. And for me, as I said, it was a really cool experience. I wouldn't want to miss it. And I'm really excited to see what else is gonna be triggered by the sort of chain reaction that was the Gaucho Derby for me. And I'm also keeping an eye on the Equestrianist and what they may have up their sleeve for future events. So that's exciting. And yeah, links are in the description box below, any brands or products that I've mentioned. If you have any further questions or would like to know anything more, feel free to comment. I'll try to get to everything. And other than that, have fun, be safe, and happy trails. The end.